Control is a cage, and I was trapped in it for too long. A wife with a smile sharper than any blade. A father-in-law with money that could bury a man alive. Together, they thought they owned me. But they underestimated what desperation and rage can ignite. I didn't leave quietly. I took what mattered most to them, their power, their pride, and their secrets. $96,000 and one ledger were my keys to freedom. I'm not running. I'm erasing their control, starting with her lies. This is no escape, it's my revenge. Houston, Texas, late spring, 1947. Following him from a small inn in the Houston Heights area was easy, which was normal for my job as a private eye. Most people don't pay much attention to their surroundings, especially what's behind them. The darkness and poor streetlights made it even simpler to track him through the quiet streets. He walked with his head down and hands in his pockets, only looking up when he crossed streets or when a dog barked. He seems relaxed. This makes my job easier. I reminded myself to stay cautious since the biggest payday of my career was coming up. Don't get too sure of yourself. This could be someone else, I warned myself, even though a bit of doubt lingered. Before the war, we all had ice boxes that needed a block of ice every few days. Ice houses where people made and sold ice were popular spots for folks to meet and chat. These places are becoming rare now that most homes have refrigerators. But in Houston, a few ice houses still serve as community hangouts, similar to local bars, where people grab snacks and drinks. I followed him into an ice house on West 20th Street, just off Shepherd. Watching him go in, I felt sure this was Paul Smith, but I needed to confirm it. After waiting a few minutes, I slipped through a side door from the old loading dock and sat on a bar stool under a soft light at the end of the L-shaped bar. The bartender looked over at me, and I pointed to the grand prize beer sign behind him. He nodded in response. As I waited, I took out a nice 5x7 photo his wife had given me, keeping it safe in my worn bag. I lit up a cigarette and, by its faint glow, compared the photo to the light-skinned man about 15 feet away. After a moment, I closed the lighter and put it back in my pocket. He was chatting happily with the bartender, calling him Pete. Soon, a man in overalls approached and said, "How's it going, Paul?" "Bingo! That's Paul Smith. A lot of private investigators are searching far away, and I found him." I sighed with relief and felt relaxed for the first time in 3 weeks. There's nothing quite like finding someone, especially someone as tricky to track down as Paul Smith. "Really good, Chet," Smith replied with a genuine smile. The two shared a quiet laugh over their drinks. Smith had been around long enough to be recognized because it had been about 6 weeks since he walked out on his wife, Christine, back in Fort Worth. She mentioned he left 3 days after a big disagreement. Smith carried himself with confidence and charm. Seeing the real man helped me understand why Christine wanted him back, and explained how he moved up from Marine Private to First Lieutenant during the war. I remembered all the guys like Smith and thought about whether I had ever met them. Before this moment, I knew Paul Smith only from what others had said and what I found out by looking into his life. Carefully following clues, talking to people, and trusting my instincts, I learned about him. I found him in Houston, Texas's largest city. Now, I was standing in front of the real man. We were both around 5'10", but Smith was heavier and had at least 10 more pounds on me. I guessed he weighed about 165. He had played football at SMU before the war and still looked strong. While I have dark skin and brown eyes, he has light blonde hair and blue eyes. Smith looked better in person than in the photo I carried. The magazines described guys like him as handsome in a charming way. He had a special quality that made him stand out. I felt proud to have found him where others had failed. But strangely, the happiness felt empty. I knew why, but I pushed it down for the sake of my employer's reward. As Pete replaced my empty beer and put down a bowl of salted peanuts, I thought back to my first meeting with Christine Norton Smith, a well-known woman from Fort Worth. She was one of 2 daughters of Delbert J. Norton, a wealthy widower involved in farming and business. He also played a minor role in North Texas politics. Fort Worth, Texas, 23 days earlier. She called my office and got right to the point. "Mr. Winters, this is Christine Norton Smith." I didn't mind the extra S in my last name. "My father's lawyer, Rusk Jameson, told me you're the best person in Texas for this job. I need your help right away. Getting a call from one of the famous Norton sisters who confidently mentioned a respected former district attorney quickly chased away my tiredness. It woke me up. Well, yes, ma'am, I said, trying to gather myself. I've worked for Cy Brown and Ewell Vickers finding people who skip town on loans, and when— I know all that, Mr. Winters, she interrupted. My husband, Paul, left me a little over 3 weeks ago. Her voice shook as she added, No, he really walked out on me and— Mrs. Smith took a breath to steady herself. As I waited for her to continue, I remembered the photos in the newspapers. They showed a cheerful and bold socialite who, with her sister, often pushed the boundaries of good taste in our reserved Fort Worth society. Now, imagining her as a sad wife changed how I saw her. As a private investigator, understanding how people think is essential for my job. I know that family and personal problems affect everyone, no matter their background. Once she calmed down, I suggested, Let's meet in person to talk about how I can help you, Mrs. Smith. Smith. Even though Christine Norton had a lot of money and power, the absence of her husband left her feeling helpless. In less than 2 hours, a driver in a shiny black 1947 Cadillac arrived to pick me up from my small office above Dubček's saddlery, just northwest of the stockyards. I sat in the front seat at Christine's request to avoid drawing attention. It seemed a bit odd, but I get paid to focus on my job, not to worry about small things. As we drove away, the driver joked, How can you stand being so close to the stockyards even with a nice breeze? I replied, The rent is cheap, and the smell lets me know when it's time to leave the office. You work alone? He asked, glancing at me. Yeah. Mrs. Dubček helps out when I'm not there, and I have someone who answers calls. He laughed and said, I always thought private investigators had lovely secretaries who admired them. He offered me a drink, smiling. How about a little something to take the edge off? I smiled and shook my head. Thanks, but I don't drink hard liquor while I'm working. He nodded and said, You just passed Mrs. Smith's first test. Then he casually tossed the bottle out of sight. Besides, who drinks that stuff anyway? We rode in silence for the rest of the trip. Del Norton had built a stylish house in Westover Hills. Christine was waiting for me in a large sitting room, which had a flashy 1930s Hollywood style that felt a bit out of place, yet still looked nice. I suppose having money can overshadow any signs of being over the top. Seated on a large couch, Christine seemed smaller than in her photos, as most were taken from a low angle. Her auburn hair was neatly styled, and despite her natural beauty, you could see the tiredness and worry on her face. Makeup mostly hid the dark circles under her eyes, but her expression showed her concern. She wore a classy navy blue dress, matching heels, and a simple strand of pearls. Christine smoothly got up from the couch where she had been reading a magazine and sipping on what appeared to be iced tea. A half-read book titled Guadalcanal Diary lay on the coffee table. I had pictured the Norton sisters' private space to look similar, just without the reading material. After we introduced ourselves, we sat on opposite sofas. She offered me coffee from a silver set that a maid quietly placed on the table. I saw you notice the book, she said. I wanted to learn about your experiences in the war. She smiled at my surprise. Yes, I know you served as a Marine in the 1st Division. Like my friend Paul, you've also seen a lot of action. So how? With a smile, Christine interrupted me. Mr. Winter, I looked into your background because the detective agencies I've hired to find Paul haven't had much luck, and you will notice that I got your name right. She smiled softly as she took out a few typed pages from her magazine and waved them. Daddy's lawyer put together a short biography about you. Most importantly, you have a good reputation for finding people. Daddy and I think that having served in the same Marine division as Paul could help. You might understand him better. Do you agree? I nodded, feeling curious. Did I know Paul Smith? First, thank you for the kind words, I said. Her expression changed slightly. Oh, Mr. Winter, kindness has nothing to do with this. You will find I am a bit unusual and can be a little spoiled. That's because my mother passed away giving birth to my sister Rita, and Daddy raised 2 girls who can be quite determined. She chuckled softly. He feels quite bad that we had to grow up without proper guidance. Seeing my discomfort, she laughed and said, "Come on now. You read the newspapers, and right after the Opry on Saturdays, there's that talk show on NBC. All the gossip lovers, yourself included, tune in, right?" When I didn't reply, she laughed again. "So you must know that Rita and I are quite the duo. Rita and I are polite to each other in public, but we can hardly tolerate each other. It's true we compete for Daddy's attention, but we share a similar taste in men. She's jealous that I have my Paul." She let out a light snort. "Rita is always looking for someone but hasn't had any luck, and mine is off limits." She raised her eyebrow and giggled. "You look surprised, Mr. Winter." Christine looked at me with a strange half-smile and intense eyes. "Oh dear, I've never seen a man blush, especially a tough Marine." Christine's smile was a mix of innocence and charm. "The truth, Mr. Winter, is that no one knows the real us. Our lives are quite simple. Daddy earns the money and we enjoy spending it." She laughed cheerfully. "He feels guilty that we had to take care of ourselves, so he apologizes more than he makes demands." She paused for a moment before her expression changed, almost like an angel's innocence. "Can I call you Doug?" she asked softly. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, I replied, "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Christine," she said warmly. Then her tone became more serious. "Now that we've gotten the pleasantries out of the way, let's begin looking for my husband." She regarded me thoughtfully as she filled my coffee cup. In that tense moment, I began to wonder what Paul Smith might be trying to escape from. "Was your husband working when he decided to leave?" I asked. She frowned slightly. "Oh, no. He wanted to go back to college using the GI Bill. His credits from SMU transferred to TCU," she said. "Did you support that decision?" I asked. She paused. "At first, I wasn't on board, but I learned to respect his choice." I stayed quiet, and she added, "Paul had been gone for almost 3.5 years. I hadn't seen him since he came back for a short leave before going away in the spring of '42. When he returned in late in '45, I wanted to renew our marriage, travel, and enjoy life. But Paul wanted to finish college starting in January." She chuckled softly. "I mean, my dad had plenty of jobs for Paul, either through his companies or connections. Paul didn't really need to work, but he felt like he had to stay busy." Suddenly, she stood up and walked to an ornate cabinet behind my sofa. "We had our differences, but he was sure about what he wanted." With a hint of frustration, Christine took 2 cigarettes from a fancy box and lit them with a silver lighter. She passed one to me, saying, "I wanted my husband back, not just a student. He was determined to take a full course load, too." The cigarette glowed as she took a deep puff. Christine moved to the far side of the large room and looked through the tall windows into the sunny afternoon. Paul Smith stood his ground, I thought. "Have you checked at the university? Talked to his friends or professors?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes still distant. "Of course. That was the first thing they looked into," she replied. "But nothing. At TCU, they told us that one day he just stopped going to classes." After a moment, she put out the cigarette in a decorative ashtray and returned to the sofa, a slight frown on her face. Then her mood changed again. With a professional yet warm tone, Christine Norton Smith spent the next half hour sharing how she met Paul. She talked about falling for the handsome, confident football player from the tough East Texas oil fields. He was on a football scholarship at SMU, and even though he came from nothing, he really stood out among the wealthy students. His confidence and presence demanded respect, and everyone noticed him. She glanced away for a moment and added, "Paul is so strong and steady. He makes me a better person." Nervously, she brushed her hair back and smiled faintly. "He makes me so happy." Taking on her engaging tone once more, she continued, "We made quite a couple. Of course, my dad and my good friends were pretty surprised by our romance." Taking a sip of coffee, Christine looked at me with bright eyes over the rim of her fine cup. Softly, the attractive brunette said, "Like 2 adventurous young people, we went a little too far. Thinking I was going to have a baby, Paul and I ran away to Shreveport and got married. That license was the best dollar I ever spent. When we got back, Paul went straight to Daddy, and for a moment I worried about both of them." She smiled faintly, as if recalling something from the past. In the end, Daddy gave in, just like he always does. A few weeks later, we discovered it was just a misunderstanding. Her expression turned sad, and she whispered, "And I cried when I found out." Christine looked down at her hands, twisting her simple gold wedding ring. She let out a dry laugh. Rita was really dramatic about it. The nicest thing she called me was ruined. As usual, Daddy made her a peace offering. This time it was a new Mercury V8. But she crashed it a month later. She looked away with a strange half-smile and said softly, "Rita doesn't put much effort into being unpleasant. It just comes naturally to her." For a moment, a shadow crossed her pretty face. After a thoughtful pause, Christine's mood shifted, and she happily talked about her life with Paul Smith. They lived in a small apartment near SMU. Even though he got a scholarship for sports, the coaches ignored his marriage, thanks in part to her father's influence as a big supporter. Sometimes Paul stayed in his dorm the night before games, she explained, and often ate with the team. Otherwise, our life was fun and easy. For the first time, I felt truly loved. She shared their shock when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Paul and many of his teammates rushed to join the service. "Did they try to make him an officer since he was in college?" I asked. With a wistful smile, Christine nodded. "Yes, most boys from SMU became officers, but Paul said it wasn't for him. People were drawn to him, and I believe he would have made a great officer." She gave me an intense look. "Paul is a true man, and by the end of the war, he realized he was meant to be an officer." She brightened and reached into a small drawer on the coffee table, pulling out a stack of photos. "Here's one from late 1944, after that important island Peleliu." I said, "Peleliu." As I looked at the photo, I felt uneasy as memories came flooding back. After that tough experience, Paul Smith looked worn out, thin, and his eyes seemed older than his years. Old at 23, I thought. Christine only saw her beloved on a sunny tropical island, missing the hardship reflected in the picture. "Yes, that one," she said, nodding. "After that, they promoted Paul to officer rank." "He accepted a battlefield commission," I added quietly. "There were many of those after Peleliu," I whispered, now lost in my thoughts. I held my hands together nervously in my lap as Christine watched me closely. She looked at me with curiosity before saying, "Yes, one of those." She went through more pictures of Paul and added, "During the big battle in Okinawa, Paul left his unit and took charge of a company? Is that the right term?" "Yes, that happened often because many officers were not able to serve," I replied. It became normal for corporals or sergeants to lead smaller groups, and for less experienced officers to handle larger units. Suddenly, a phone rang from a nearby room. Christine excused herself, speaking in quiet, urgent tones. When she returned, she looked upset and sank into the large sofa. "That was the man whose team is trying to find Paul across the bay near San Francisco." Frustration filled her eyes. 10 men and good equipment, and they still can't find any sign of him. "Why there?" I asked. Christine sighed, crossing her arms tightly. She spoke softly. "When Paul came back in late of 45, I knew things would be different. He felt it too, and we both tried hard to return to how things were in January 42 when he left." Her gaze drifted to a painting on the wall. After taking a deep breath, she continued, "You aren't married, but you understand what those times were like." Her eyes fell to my left hand. "Yes, ma'am, but I was still a kid, just about 18, when I joined the Corps 6 days after Pearl Harbor." "Try to imagine being married," she said. "I can only imagine," I replied. "I know that coming home was, in some ways, harder than leaving." A lot of my work as a detective came from the huge changes in America after the war. Noticing her struggle to speak, I asked, "So tell me why you think Paul is near San Francisco." Her discomfort grew, and after a long pause, Christine looked at me and said quietly, "A woman?" I nodded without showing my feelings and asked, "Does this woman live there? Did he say he was going to meet her? Are there any clues?" Christine nervously played with her pearl necklace and replied, Let me explain." She started, "It was a tough day and we both had too much to drink, especially Paul. We had an argument about me dancing close with someone at Charlene Bassett's birthday party. We said some hurtful things to each other, and like I can be sometimes, I brought up someone from his past. She twisted her hands slowly. That's when Paul mentioned a woman he met during the war. She was a nurse. When I asked where he met her, he reminded me he was hurt and spent time in a U.S. Navy hospital in New Zealand. Well, go to her, I said. He said, well, maybe I should. We finally relaxed and apologized. As Paul fell asleep, I whispered kind words to him. Poor Paul couldn't handle his drink. I softly asked him, sugar pie? Where does that nurse from the war live? He giggled and gave me that silly smile, saying, she's from Richmond, near Golden Bay. When he left, that was all I knew. My detectives figured out that Paul was near Richmond, California, on the east side of San Francisco Bay. The Golden Bay part didn't fit exactly, but given that Paul was drunk, it made some sense when I thought about the Golden Gate and San Francisco Bay. Christine seemed more cheerful. I also found out her name, Ruth. The U.S. Navy Hospital in New Zealand, I recalled from the war. She nodded. The letters he sent from there said it was a naval hospital with American staff. Do you want me to help the team you have looking for him? I asked. No, you're my backup, she said with a smile at my confused look. I want you to work on your own and start fresh here in Fort Worth. We might have missed something. Look into everything we have about Paul. Check the ongoing investigation and see what else you can find. You might agree with the others or discover that Paul set off to start anew. She punched her palm and insisted, but I want to cover all our bases. Paul is smart, and I can't let him get away. We just can't. Her eyes sparkled with emotion and determination. She definitely knew how to get what she wanted. I'll do my best, I promised. After studying me for a moment, Christine approached a beautiful writing desk against the wall. She opened a large drawer and took out a big packet, handing it to me. Now, Doug, give me your contract, and I'll sign it. Once we signed the contract, she gave me a check for $500 as a retainer and tapped the packet. Here's everything we have so far. It has an information sheet about Paul, the latest reports from my detectives in the field, and what they've found or haven't found, she said, shaking her head in frustration. There's also $1,000 for expenses, a picture of Paul, a list of phone numbers and addresses, and 2 letters of introduction signed by my father. Our family name might help us get information from the right people. Looking me in the eye, she stated, pull out all the stops. As soon as you find him, call me, day or night. I want to hurry to his side and bring him home. Don't lose sight of him until I get there. She held my gaze firmly. Understand? Yes, ma'am, I replied earnestly. She stared at me for a few more seconds before saying, good, find him, Doug, and I'll make it worth your while. Christine then explained the many resources she had to reach Paul quickly. For the next half hour, we talked about everything in the packet. I made notes and wrote down some ideas. Now, Doug, we need to talk about something very important. 2 things, actually. She looked away, worried and frowned in thought. When Paul left, he, took something from Daddy. She said this all at once. Took something? I asked, confused. Yes, that hurt almost as much as him leaving, she said sadly. Why did he take your father's things? I asked. She shrugged as if she had never thought about it before. My right eyebrow raised in surprise. Did you tell the police? Christine shook her head slowly. No. Daddy and I decided not to involve them. How much did Paul take? About $96,000, she replied. I whistled in surprise. $96,000? Some banks don't keep half that amount. I know, Mr. Winter, she snapped. She took a deep breath. Look, I'm sorry, Doug. It's just that... I understand, I said, even though I was still trying to figure it all out. I needed her to keep talking. I'm surprised by that amount. Yes, it seems strange, but Daddy deals with a lot of cash, she explained. About $96,000? I asked again, trying not to show my shock. Oh, around 96, maybe a little more or less, she clarified. He doesn't keep a very good record of his cash. Around? That one word said a lot about how different our financial situations were. Thinking about how hard it must be to keep track of that much cash, I asked, did Paul take it all at once? Looking a bit embarrassed, Christine replied, yes, because Daddy kept it all in 50s, hundreds, $500 bills, and some $1,000 notes. He's a bit unusual like that. I thought I had heard it all, but there was more to come. How did he get into your father's safe? Christine looked confused, so I explained further. Did he find a way to open it, or what happened? This would tell me a lot about Paul Smith. With a pained look, she shook her head. No, it was Daddy's mistake. He locks his safe but doesn't like going through the steps to open it, so he often leaves the combination open at the last number. And Paul knew that, I said. She held back a smile and said with a hint of pride, I told you my Paul is smart, didn't I? I nodded slowly and asked, What's the second important matter? Looking more nervous, she said, There was also a heavy greenish-gray book. It's about this big. She shaped her hands to show a size similar to an average notebook. It was a ledger, right? Yes, she responded, surprised. It's kept in a canvas sleeve. I had seen these kept in safes before, so I thought they were notes on her father's finances, but it was odd that Paul took it too. Do you know why Paul took your father's notes? She paused for a moment and said, No, but Daddy needs it back. Looking me straight in the eyes, she continued, Get back the money and you can keep 10%. The notes could be worth another $2,000. I felt my throat go dry at the thought of such a big reward before my curiosity kicked in. What could be in those notes that's worth that much? Even though this task excited me, my past experiences made me feel uneasy. But the amount of money was hard to ignore, and I was intrigued by Paul Smith. Okay, I'll get started on it, I said as we stood up and shook hands. Pete's Ice House, Houston, Texas, late spring, 1947. A loud customer broke into my thoughts. He was entertaining two guys and a lively blonde in their 20s with stories from his time as a Marine during the war. I was interested for a different reason than the others. Smith and Chet also gave him annoyed looks. The loud talker went back and forth between the bar and his listeners, holding a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other. His loud voice and dramatic manner made it hard for other customers at nearby tables to ignore him, and a couple turned their chairs to watch. This guy is irritating, but I am here to work. Smith stood near the one good light at that end of the bar, and I saw his face grow tense. As I focused back on the storyteller, I shared his discomfort. With great enthusiasm, the loud talker shared, There were waves of enemy forces coming at us. They charged together, shouting wildly, and just as we took some down, another group rushed in. Oh dear. My drink suddenly didn't seem appealing. You see, on the canal, which we Marines called Guadalcanal, the only good enemy soldier was one who didn't return. He chuckled softly, thinking it was funny. I even heard old famous Chesty Puller say that. You know, he was a regular guy who was close to us soldiers. Oh, yes, one of his friends chimed in. I read about him in the Saturday Evening Post. The storyteller took a long drag on his cigarette, the tip glowing and fading. Come on, don't believe everything you read. Chesty was real to us Marines, but a lot of what's out there isn't true. That's why they call him a legend. We knew the real man behind that story. Smith glanced over at Chet and rolled his eyes. I felt frustrated as I listened. I can't believe this guy has never even been west of Abilene. I didn't know why people like Loudmouth got under my skin, but this one was particularly annoying. Soon, Smith turned away from Loudmouth, looking a mix of irritated and tired. While Loudmouth kept talking, Smith's eyes drifted toward me, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere. Why am I still here? I should finish my drink, step outside, and call Christine. Then I can wait for her until she arrives, probably tomorrow morning. I knew there were phone booths in the Rexall store a short walk away. It's time to go, Chet snorted and said, I've heard enough for this week. He finished his drink and slid some coins to the bartender. See you tomorrow, Pete. Hopefully this guy will quiet down by then. Bartender Pete smiled and replied, Yeah, see you tomorrow. Give my regards to Marie. Chet nodded and put on his old hat. Before heading out, he called back, Don't forget to stay sharp. Loudmouth paused, glared after Chet and shouted, Oh, be quiet. Just keep walking, wise guy. His audience laughed. Now where was I? Loudmouth asked. Oh, right. The night the enemy crossed the river, I could feel it in my gut, you know? That happens after a few intense moments. He continued on in a way that really got on my nerves. Smith tapped his fingers on the bar with increasing frustration while Loudmouth kept spinning his tall tails. He took a long drag on his cigarette and put it out in the ashtray. The kid bothered me, but I was on the job. I tried to relax and started to gather my things so I could leave the place. I had finished the hard part of my work. I jumped a little when Smith hit the bar with his fist, making Loudmouth stop talking. Smith turned around fast enough that Pete seemed to tense up, eyeing whatever he kept under the bar. "Listen, kid, I don't believe you've ever been to Guadalcanal," Smith said in a low voice, clearly frustrated. "You can't be old enough to have been there." "That's what I'm talking about. Set that young kid straight." My plan to leave slipped away, and I put my things back on the bar. "Mind your own business, mister," Loudmouth shot back, and a few people laughed. Pete whispered something to Smith, and they leaned in close, talking quietly. Nodding, Pete seemed to relax and crossed his arms against the bar. Turning back to Loudmouth, Smith asked, "Who were you with on Guadalcanal?" This was the moment. I held back a smile. Annoyed, Loudmouth snapped back, "The Marines, wise guy. The Army got there later once we did all the hard work." He chuckled, and his 3 fans and someone further away joined in. "What unit, buddy?" Smith pressed, sounding serious. "Go get him." I felt a mix of strange emotions. Surprised, Loudmouth thought for a moment. "First Marines. Who else?" "Wow, my old unit. Forget leaving this place." Now he had my complete attention. My heart raced and my palms got sweaty as I climbed back onto the bar stool. "Oh? The first?" Smith asked calmly. "Who was in charge?" Loudmouth hesitated, but quickly answered, "Who? General Vandergrift." "Who else?" I couldn't help but laugh along with Smith as my doubts about Loudmouth faded away. Everyone at the table turned to look at us, and soft laughter followed. Smith smiled brightly at me. I tried to stay calm, but I felt excited. Turning back to Loudmouth, Smith said, "Vandergrift led the 1st Marine Division." He stressed the last word. "I asked you who you were with, kid. What unit? What regiment?" Usually a real Marine wouldn't need to be asked this. This was getting interesting. My hands were shaking. Loudmouth stared angrily at Smith, unable to respond. I couldn't hold back, so I spoke up. "I was with Fox Company 1st Marines." A true Marine wouldn't need to give the battalion number. On Guadalcanal, our leader was Colonel Clifton Cates. My throat felt dry, so I took a sip of cold beer. "Since you and Chesty were good friends, what unit did you both serve with on Guadalcanal?" I asked. I was sure he wouldn't be able to answer this. The young man looked at me, and I could see doubt in his eyes, but he didn't give in. "First Marines, like I told you." I replied. "Wrong. Chesty was with the 7th Marines on Guadalcanal and only led the 1st Battalion. Jimmy Webb was in charge of the 7th until Vandergrift replaced him and gave the regiment to Amor Sims. To make things worse for you, the 7th didn't even arrive with us because they were stuck on Samoa. They didn't join until mid-September, after the first big fight in the hills near Henderson Field. "Semper Fi, Mac," Smith said with a huge smile. I waved back, thinking, what did I just say? I'm not sure, but it felt good. Smith addressed everyone at the table and the others watching. A Marine regiment is always known by its number, like the 1st Marines or the 5th Marines. A division, like the 1st Marine Division, is always referred to by its full name, or just the 1st Division if we're only talking about Marine divisions. In my quiet corner, I scolded myself for speaking out. But I hadn't felt this good in a long time. Smith said, "This guy is typical of those who read about the war and want everyone to believe they were part of it. Why anyone would wish for Guadalcanal or any of those other islands is beyond me." I thought, Smith knows how to handle himself well. No wonder they put those labels on him. I sadly remembered all the promotions after Peleliu and Okinawa. Loudmouth argued, "I was there, you know, just because I might have forgotten some details." I cut in, "All right, maybe you forgot." Smith and I both laughed at the silliness, and I asked, "Tell me this, how much did you weigh when we landed?" Surprised, he replied, "What? My weight." Why does that matter? Simple question. How much did you weigh before you landed on Guadalcanal? Let's see. Maybe 140. Could be 145, he answered hesitantly. With a knowing smile, Smith continued my line of questioning. Did you leave with the rest of the division, or did you need to leave because of injuries? Smith had that relaxed yet commanding way typical of those who earned their place in combat. I was there until we left in, I guess, December, Loudmouth said, sounding unsure. My experience told me that people who lie often sound uncertain. Okay, so how much did you weigh when you got on the ship? Smith asked. Loudmouth shrugged slowly. Oh, maybe the same. Maybe a bit more. Why? We both laughed, and Smith said, well, you were the only one to gain weight on that island. Maybe the rats were fat too from eating leftovers. I added, the Corps got me up to a solid 148 and gave me a rifle. When we boarded the ship to leave Guadalcanal, I weighed about 125, give or take a pound or two. And I was in better shape than many. Loudmouth looked shocked and seemed like he wanted to hide. As his lies came to light, his friends looked uncomfortable. Smith gave me an encouraging wink, and I went on. Most of my group couldn't climb the nets to get on the ships without help, even just wearing our worn-out clothes and the little gear that survived. The Navy even used nets to lift some of us aboard. I stared at him until he looked away. Months of fighting in the jungle, sleeping in muddy holes, dealing with shells and bombs, facing giant mosquitoes, eating poorly, and surviving sickness left us in bad shape, I said. Did I forget anything? I asked Smith. With a sly grin, he replied, that covers it, unless you want to mention the rain and flies. Then Smith continued, my luck ran out in late October. While getting supplies for my group, we faced unexpected shots from afar. I needed to be flown out for injuries, and they fixed me up just in time for Cape Gloucester. When they took me to the hospital, they said I was 29 pounds underweight. He lit up another cigarette, took a deep breath, and blew a lazy smoke ring. Living in those conditions did that to all of us, from the top down. Looking at a much quieter Loudmouth, Smith said softly, nothing personal, kid, but maybe you should take a good look in the mirror. You aren't like us who were there. It shows in how we act and look. We can't feel at ease like you and your friends do. He pointed at me and said, he understands what I mean. Honestly, I wish I could be like you and not have faced such a terrible experience. He added honestly, I'm grateful you didn't have to go through it. It's all confusing, he said with a dry laugh. Nothing from that time makes any sense to me anymore. You can't just forget about it when you come home. He glanced at me and I nodded. He's right. I said, I don't blame anyone for not being at Guadalcanal or those other places. What bothers me is when you pretend you were there. You talk about the bravery, friendships, and bonds, which were the only good things from that chaos. You haven't earned that. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. I continued, if you weren't there, you could read all the books and articles, watch all the films, and listen to us who were. No matter how hard you try, you can't truly understand what it was like. Your stories come from what you've seen and read, but they can never capture the reality. We can't fully express our experiences because words fail us. You can't explain what you can't put into words. Smith nodded slowly, leaned against the bar, and stared off into space. He spoke quietly, and the room grew silent. The smell. I often think about the unique smell of those times. If I catch a hint of a bad smell that reminds me of that. It clicks, he snapped his fingers, and suddenly I'm back there. I can't describe it. He shook his head and breathed out heavily. Now go home and be thankful, kid. Thank God you weren't involved. And remember us who were. He gave Phil some money. Buy a drink or two for the kids' table. He handed over a couple more bills and said, take care of the room. Nodding toward me, he added, especially for that Marine back there. Exhausted, Smith sat on a bar stool and stared into his drink, forgetting about his cigarette. A long ash formed and slowly fell. The shadows hid his eyes, but I recognized that look because I felt the same way. We were nowhere near Houston instead. We were back on that island. That little reminder pulled us back there, and it upset me. It picked at the wounds we tried to ignore. It opened up the memories of fear, madness, and pain, spilling everything out. Smith and I quietly examined it all. We dealt with the shame, too. I survived Guadalcanal only to get hurt on the second day of the Cape Gloucester landing. Like Smith, they patched me up just in time for the next battle, which was Betrayal. Many of us faced great loss in the tough conditions of Betrayal. While fighting against the enemy, we paid a steep price. Puller led the first Marines on that island and almost took us all down. The enemy had strong positions, protected by thick walls and metal. Our only defense was the sharp coral around us, our helmets, and sturdy uniforms. The campaign took a heavy toll on the 1st Marines, and we lost many men. The 5th Marines also suffered greatly. After that intense experience, something changed inside me. Everything I had believed in seemed to vanish, and I was left feeling incomplete. I stopped fearing death because it felt easier to accept than to live in fear of it. After Betrayal, I felt I wouldn't make it through the next battle, which was Okinawa. Oddly, I was okay with that. I saw surviving Okinawa as a cruel trick because the final battle would be in Japan, and there were fears of many lives being lost. We sensed our limits were approaching, hoping for a way out or a quick end beside our friends. What I didn't expect was the bomb that ended the war and my survival. I wasn't sure if I should be happy because I felt so mixed inside. I found it hard to believe we had made it through, that fate wouldn't take us now that the fighting was over. Fear and faint hope battled inside us. The comfort of accepting death slipped away, leaving me in a world where so many brave Marines, better men than me, didn't make it back. I struggled with the shame of being alive. Why me and not them? Guilt overshadowed any relief. Living with the memories of what I survived often felt worse than the things I faced because they were always in my mind. I started to see those who had died as the lucky ones, finally at peace. Did I even deserve this life? I hadn't earned it, and now I sat with another survivor of that terrible time. In my hands, I held the future of someone I connected with more than my own family. Thankfully, the darkness hid my face. Semper Fidelis means always faithful, I recalled. It was time to embrace that and start living it. I came to Houston to find Paul W. Smith, take back the money and ledger, and return everything to Christine while improving my reputation. I decided to do what was right for both Smith and me. Whatever the payoff, it didn't matter. I leaned in close to the hunched figure before me and said, "Semper Fi, Mac, Semper Fi, my brother." For the first time since the war began in '41, I cried. I cried for all of us. Pete's Ice House, Houston, Texas, late spring 1947. Just before 10 p.m., Pete started to close up. I asked Smith if he would like to grab coffee and pie at a small diner down the block on Shepherd. "Sure." "At Dolly's Diner," he answered. Not wanting to give myself away, I asked, "How many times did your group land?" "All 4, he said proudly. Not many can say that. "I can too," I replied, matching his pride. Smith looked surprised, then broke into a big smile. I added, "I went from the Wellington docks to that last camp at Motabu." "And here we are, both standing," Smith said quietly. "I switched from the 5th to the 7th after Betrayal. You stayed in the 1st? "I only moved from Fox to Baker Company after Betrayal," I explained. Marines often changed within the division during the war, and I knew his new role had him with the 7th. We introduced ourselves, and I acted as though he was a stranger. "Nice to meet you, Paul," I said. "I'm Douglas Winter, but everyone calls me Doug." As we walked, he shared a brief story about himself, leaving out some details. We sat in one of the booths facing the lunch counter and ordered from the menu on the wall. Just outside, late-night traffic moved along Shepherd, and a radio played softly behind the counter. Wobbly ceiling fans turned slowly above us. After the counterman brought our coffee and slices of apple pie, Smith asked, "Are you from around here?" I took a sip of the hot drink and replied, "No, I'm from Haltom City, just outside Fort Worth." He seemed to recognize the name. "Sure, I know it," he said, sounding a bit uninterested. "What brings you here?" he asked. "Business. I'm a manufacturer's representative," I said, sticking to my usual cover story. He sipped his coffee, blowing on it to cool it down. After a moment, Smith said, "I'm from Gladewater. I grew up in a tough area." I nodded, showing I was listening, and he continued speaking. "Not much else to share," he said, looking a bit unsure. "Like many during the Depression, I had my struggles but graduated high school. I played some sports in high school and college, was pretty good, and joined the Corps right after Pearl Harbor." He stirred his coffee slowly, smiling as he added, "We all drink it black, don't we?" I smiled back. "The Corps doesn't add cream and sugar." After taking another careful sip, I asked, "And after you returned home?" Smith changed the subject. "Well, Doug, I had enough points for a ride home on a special ship. Did you?" I nodded. He continued, "I was on a light cruiser whose name escapes me." He chuckled. "Those ships seemed huge from the beach when they were helping us, but felt small with a group of Marines on board. We made it work, though, because we were all heading home." Smith smiled at the memory. I remembered. I returned as part of a unit camping in the hangar deck of an escort carrier. We were in a tight spot, but we were thankful to be alive. The lamp was always on, and the ocean felt different. What made it better was the hot meals and coffee available all the time. For the next hour, we talked about our time in the 1st Marine Division. Only a few of us made it through the whole war. Many did not survive, many were hurt, and never came back. And some moved to other divisions as the Corps grew from a small naval force to 6 divisions by VJ Day. As things went on, men from our division helped create 5 new divisions, especially as officers and NCOs. A handful of us remained. As we shared our stories, names, and places connected us. We enjoyed a comfortable quiet, listening to Glenn Miller's String of Pearls playing softly on the radio. "I was discharged as a staff sergeant," I said. "How about you?" "I was a staff sergeant until Palayu," he replied. "Before I left there, the skipper of the 5th. "Bucky Harris," I added, and he nodded. Called me into his tent and handed me a set of gold bars. "Sergeant, it's time for you to step up and help us finish this war," he said. After shaking my hand, he told me to find Captain over at Dog Company 7th. He's your new boss, and now you're his most experienced platoon commander. I ended the war as a 1st lieutenant. Smith sighed and said, "Thank goodness we didn't have to invade Japan." "We wouldn't be sitting here," I agreed. Our conversation flowed with shared experiences. We moved from serious topics to funny stories, especially from before Guadalcanal. We laughed about working as cargo handlers for the Guadalcanal landing, which had been moved up by several weeks. The longshoremen went on strike, so the men of our division unloaded our transports, sorted everything, and loaded it again for the attack. Weapons, food, vehicles, fuel, and medical supplies were packed last, so they could be taken off first. Piles of gear and equipment filled the docks, with Marines rushing around. Many supplies were damaged or left behind, and it rained the whole time. "Cornflakes!" Smith laughed. "I still can't stand them." I chuckled and agreed. When those soggy boxes broke open, we were stuck in that sticky mess, weren't we? It was tricky, but just think if we'd landed with the ships loaded the way they came from home, Smith pointed out, and I nodded. Most of the food and essentials were still on those transports when the Navy had to pull back. I said with frustration, "They left us on Guadalcanal with half rations and low on ammo. I worried we'd end up like the Army cut off on Corregidor." He shook his head in dismay. "Oh, did I ever learn to dislike rice and canned fish?" Smith remembered. We both laughed, causing some other customers to turn and look at us. They thought we were drunk, but really, we were just remembering the tough times we had on Guadalcanal. Back then, we survived on Japanese food supplies like rice, canned crab, dried fish, and soybeans. Like many Marines there, I often blamed the Navy, which was only natural since they were the junior partner in the U.S. Naval Service. "I still have my complaints," I said, and Smith raised his coffee cup in a playful salute. No wonder they put one on the Cracker Jack box. We pretended to forget how much the Navy helped us by holding back the enemy, getting the 7th Marines there, and keeping us supplied. Spending 100 days in tough conditions almost made us feel abandoned. For a moment, we both forgot why we were sitting in a coffee shop in Houston on a cool spring night. It felt good to connect over our shared experiences. I said, "Look at us." Smith looked at me, waiting. We both made it. We got hurt, but we got through the worst Palayu in Okinawa. And we're mostly okay, right? We laughed nervously, knowing deep down that we were not okay and maybe never would be, especially at night when it was quiet and hard to forget. Certain sounds and smells startled us. Our reactions embarrassed us and disturbed others, but we were still alive. I decided to share something. "I have an older brother, but I'm closer to you and guys like us. He spent the war at Fort Dix teaching Army radio school. Smith nodded in understanding. So keep this in mind. I've been looking for you for over 3 weeks, I admitted. Smith's knowing smile caught me off guard. So that's why you followed me tonight. You knew? Of course, he said. We picked up a few things while out there, especially in the jungle. I lit 2 more cigarettes and offered him one. Smiling, I said, I'm just used to dealing with different kinds of people. You work for Christine, he said, studying me closely. Yes. Now we were going back and forth, friendly but careful. I figured as much, he said. With a serious face, Smith added, Okay, what now? But listen, Doug, I'm not going back to Christine. We're done, he exclaimed. Trying to stay calm, I replied, I almost walked away tonight and called your wife. I was about to leave here, clean, he said, feeling frustrated. And then you showed up. I don't apologize, Paul. I was doing my job. A good-paying job, too. What changed? You had me, and all you had to do was back off and follow her orders. His blue eyes became stern. Everything changed, I said. That kid at the ice house and how we reacted shows that we are different. I bet we crossed paths during our time out there. We experienced the same bad dreams, the same worries, and the same sadness together. We were grateful to see the same sunrisings and resentful of the same sunsets. Are you really letting me go? He asked with caution. I am, but there are some things I need to understand, I replied, looking serious. I'm curious and I need to know what we are facing. We? He said, surprised. I nodded. I'm changing my mind, Paul. Even after everything Christine told me, I have more questions now than when I started looking for you. I need answers. Okay, I can help, Smith said. But why here in Houston? I heard she has a couple of detective agencies out west searching for me. I'm good at finding people, I answered with a small smile. So how do you know about the detectives on the West Coast? I have my sources, he replied. I thought he might still have contacts in Christine's circle, but decided not to press. Shifting gears, I asked casually, Do you have anything with you? His smile faded as he scanned my light jacket. After a moment, he relaxed and said, We had enough of that while we were away. For a lifetime, I agreed. If you're not armed, then you're not a cop, he said carefully. I'm not a cop or anything else you might think. I just find people. Smith looked at me with curiosity. I continued. Like many, I came back without a job. A guy I knew in Fort Worth had a lot of loans that people were skipping. They had good jobs and paid their bills, but when the war ended, they couldn't keep up and just vanished. Smith pointed to the empty plates and raised 2 fingers. The counterman brought us 2 more slices of pie and refilled our coffee. Please bring us a couple of bowls of chili, he said, then turned to me and added, Best chili I ever had. I went on. In short, I started working as a skip tracer and did well at it. I kept that up until early last year when I became a private investigator. Smith chuckled and I laughed too. Everyone reacts like that. I've heard all the jokes. To answer your question about why here, Christine remembered you talking about meeting a girl during the war. I told him about Christine's story regarding his supposed confession, and he laughed dryly. Smith frowned as if trying to recall. I don't remember that night clearly, but she's mostly right. He seemed to think it over. If they're causing trouble on the West Coast, Christine might believe I have someone there. He shook his head slowly with a smile. They're way off. Not even close, I added. Smith stared at me intently. But you know the true story. I nodded. Yes, I do. Nobody's that good at finding things, Doug, he said, some tension in his voice. How did you know to look for me in Houston? I'm good at my job, but you left some clues, he replied, his blue eyes focused intently on me. Your mom didn't say much, but your Aunt Ruby shared details about your letters. Come on, he said quietly. Your mom didn't want to talk and acted like she barely knew you. Good old mom, Smith said with a hint of fondness. But Aunt Ruby? That makes sense. He flicked his cigarette ashes, missing the ashtray entirely. I continued. When I drove away without any leads, your aunt leaned in my window and told me your mom goes to work at 8:30. She suggested I come by around 9 with some cash so she could show me your letters. And Well, here I am. You know all about Ruth, he spoke softly. I nodded. Ruth lives in Auckland, but her family is near Richmond on Golden Bay in New Zealand. I explained how the other detectives thought Richmond, California might connect with Golden Bay and the Golden Gate. Smith listened with a blank expression as I went on. So when I got back to Fort Worth, I went to the library and started looking up shipping lists for boats to New Zealand. I found in the Houston Post that the SS Wairata, which is registered in New Zealand, is set to sail for Auckland on Saturday. I came here, paid the clerk at the shipping agency, and got your local address at Vopel's boarding house. He sighed deeply. Those are the letters Ruth wrote me during the war, he said, looking back in time. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, so I left them with my mom. Tell me about Ruth, I said. You're leaving your home and family to go so far. She must be someone special. Smith played with his cigarette as he thought about his answer. He seemed hesitant to share. Let me tell you the truth, okay? He looked at me with sincerity. You know a bit about her, but here's the real story. When I got hurt, I lay in the mud until they could reach us. I wasn't badly injured, but some shrapnel was close to my spine. By the morning of the third day, an infection started, and they sent me to Ifate on a transport plane. I remembered seeing those planes later in the campaign and realized how many Marines were hurt. On Ifate, they gave me antibiotics and nutrients, he said with a chuckle. After a few days, I began to feel more like myself. We laughed, drawing the attention of a couple of passing drivers and the counterman, who seemed to enjoy our laughter. Sorry about that, Smith said with a smile. He took a bite of his chili and continued. Anyway, they removed all the shrapnel except for 2 small pieces near my spine, and they needed to do surgery for that, which couldn't happen on Ifate. So off to New Zealand, I said. They took me on the USS Solace and brought me back to the mainland. Navy Hospital in Auckland. The Navy had its own nurses, but since they were still getting organized and had many wounded soldiers, they also hired nurses and doctors from New Zealand. The Kiwi surgeon who performed my operation had served with Anzac in the last war. You met Ruth in that Auckland hospital, I said. Yes, my dear Ruthie, Smith replied gently, his expression brightening. Ever hear of love at first sight? A hint of doubt crept into my voice. Yes, I've heard of it. My past experiences from a tough divorce had left me wary. Every divorce needed one person to blame, which complicated things. I never crossed that line, but I often found myself in tricky situations. Smith looked at me with understanding. It's real. Ruth and I are living proof. The first time we met, and she touched my arm, there was a strong connection, almost like a spark. It was just a regular nurse-patient moment, but we felt it. Before I could ask, he answered my unspoken question. We were both married and tried to fight those feelings but couldn't. We kept our relationship deep on an emotional level without going further. She calls it an affair of the heart, and it really is. I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes, hinting at deeper struggles. Who was Ruth married to? I had already learned some from the letters. He was a man named John Asmus, a carpenter from Auckland. Remember, he and many others went to the Middle East with the Commonwealth forces during the war. They were committed to helping the empire, even when many thought Japan wouldn't join the fight. Smith shook his head, thinking about it. Those poor men were far away and their home country was nearly defenseless. I remember how grateful the locals were when we arrived, I said, recalling the bonds formed between the Marines and local women before we shipped out for Guadalcanal. Smith nodded and added, We thought we had said goodbye for good, but being sentimental, I gave her mother's address to hold on to something special, knowing the war would be long. They had been fighting since '39, so Ruth and I understood the unknowns of life as a combat Marine. Since you read the letters at Mom's, you must know that Ruth found out in late '44 that her husband was killed in Italy. I nodded. Smith tiredly rubbed his eyes and continued. When I realized my marriage was ending, I sent Ruth a cable. It cost nearly $11, but I would have paid any amount back then. Smith lifted his head and his face brightened, his blue eyes shining with happiness. 2 days later, she cabled me back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch that looked like the ones we carried in the Corps. After opening the letter, he gave it to me. Here, read this. My dear Paul, yes, I accept your proposal. I love you more every day. Please let me know when you will arrive. All my love forever. Your loving Ruth. You proposed? I asked, surprised. Yes. Once I realized what Christine did, I knew my marriage was over. Smith lit another cigarette and offered me the pack, but I shook my head. After taking a few puffs, he said, "Looking back, our marriage was never strong. We were just too different." You left on Saturday without a divorce, I pointed out. She could say I abandoned her, or go to Reno to end it quickly. Or she can do whatever she wants. But I'm ready to marry Ruth and accept that the law in Texas can't reach all the way to New Zealand. I opened my mouth to speak, but he added, "Ruth agrees. New Zealand feels very far away." "You know," I said, "Christine told me that she only ever felt loved when she was with you." "Maybe," he said quietly. "But Christine says a lot while her actions tell a different story. I felt guilty about Ruth." He spoke with a hint of bitterness. "I thought Christine would be faithful, but, well," Smith shrugged. "As I said, her actions." "So how did a guy like you end up with Christine Norton?" I asked. Smith shook his head slowly and smiled. "I really don't know. I think she noticed me, got attached, said she was having a baby, and then she wanted us to marry." "Christine usually gets what she wants," he said. I listened as he shared how he met Christine. "We met at a campus event. I wasn't as well off as she was, and I was dealing with my own struggles. I was an athlete from a tough background." He laced his fingers behind his neck and relaxed. "Girls like her went to SMU to find boyfriends. Looking back, Christine was no different." My confused look made him chuckle and smile warmly. He said, "You get it? Mrs., as in married." I laughed at his joke. Smith went on, "Old Del Norton wasn't too happy when his daughter brought home someone from the oil fields. SMU was filled with future doctors, lawyers, and other professionals, but Christine didn't follow the rules. To Del, she caught something unexpected from the pond of suitors. Christine said her mother passed away when she had Rita," I noted. Smith formed a perfect smoke ring that the breeze quickly took away. "Yes, Del's mother stayed with them for a while, but a series of caregivers tried to look after the girls. Del spoiled them and didn't help the caregivers. The sisters never had anyone to guide them, so they didn't know how to hold back." Smith became quiet and gazed out the window for a full minute. Finally, he angrily put out his cigarette. I let the quiet moment speak for itself. "Anyway," he continued, "Christine told me she was going to have a baby a few months later, and we ran away to Shreveport. In Louisiana, it only costs $1 to get a marriage license, and there's no waiting. 2 weeks later, she came to me with her familiar half-smile and said she got her period. I wasn't the only one surprised by Christine's unusual smile. I didn't know if I should feel relieved or upset, but I was in love and figured it was just fate," he said with a thoughtful smile. "We kept our marriage a secret since I was on the varsity team, but everyone found out. Even the coach knew about our marriage, but since I was the best player, he chose to ignore it. After the events at Pearl Harbor, I signed up for the Marines the following Thursday. Christine cried, Del and I celebrated, and the coach even called me son. Soon after, I was off to California." Smith looked out again, lost in thought, while I observed the feelings on his face. He leaned forward, crossing his arms, his expression a mix of determination and acceptance. "So, how does my wife think she can bring me home? Like I'm just wandering around?" "She asked me to immediately call her, collect if I find you. She's ready with bags packed and a plane on standby at Meacham Field. She said, I want to rush to his side and bring him home." Those were her exact words, Paul. "From the look on your face, you don't completely believe that," Smith said. I replied, "I think Christine lives in a simple fantasy. Her best idea seems to be having no plan at all. The deeper I get into this, the more it seems off." Smith scoffed. "She pushes her way through with confidence and connections, and when that doesn't work, she uses her family's help." "So, what seems off to you?" he asked calmly. I answered, "First, the plane is a Lockheed Electra 10 that holds 10 people and travels a good distance. That makes sense since they think you're out west. I stopped at the flying service at Meacham Field to find out where they could land. I was curious about the kind of airstrip you might be on and how long it would take them to take off." "Being thorough," he remarked. It's how I work, I said, taking a bite of my chili. I told the manager I was working for Christine and wanted to understand the flying part of the plan. He told me they were ready to fly Christine and her 3 staff members with just a 2-hour notice. That surprised me because she never mentioned any staff, and that raised a concern. The White brothers and Juke Wesley, Smith replied dryly. They work for Dell. They aren't really enforcers, but they can handle things quietly when needed. I suppose it was never going to be easy, I said. Smith looked at me with interest. If Christine comes down here and you say no way, she won't leave without a fight. Smith's eyes narrowed. And I know you won't go back with her. So what does she expect to happen? He gave a small smile and said, That's why Christine will bring the White brothers and Juke Wesley. She'll first act like the caring wife, then she'll set the others on me. Knowing your situation, I replied, meeting those 3 won't end well. She must know that things could get messy, and I want no part of it. That leads to the other 2 things that seem off the money in some kind of record, I said. Christine claims you took a lot of Daddy Dell's money, and when I asked her about telling the authorities, she hesitated. She mentioned she didn't want to get you in trouble. I took a long drag from my forgotten cigarette. With Norton's contacts, the authorities would listen to whatever Christine and Dell say. I mean, a missing husband and family money, they would pay special attention to that. Or, if they decided to take a stronger approach, they'd likely set up roadblocks and search for you, given that amount of money. So, why did you take the money, and why won't they report it? I asked. With a spark in his eye, Smith leaned in and said, The reason they won't call the authorities is that I have something else, Dell's records. They are unrelated, but the money would attract attention to the records if the authorities got involved, Smith explained. Wait, you're getting ahead of me. The records are sensitive because Christine offered me $2,000 for them. Why is that? I asked. Smith responded, $2,000 is a good deal. Dell and his associates were involved in a big operation during the war. Dell Norton? I asked, surprised. Yeah, that's right. What makes these records troubling is that he kept detailed notes on what he and the others took from supplies meant for Camp Bowie and Carswell Air Base. It's a list showing there's no trust among thieves. It's even got names of others who were involved in taking their share. Did you know what it was when you took it? I asked. With a light laugh, he shook his head and responded, No. I just saw it and grabbed it along with the money. I knew it was important, and feeling upset, I wanted to take a stand. It fit into my bag, so I took it. And you looked at it later? I guessed. Yeah, I went through it while I took some time to think. What I found shocked and upset me. I never thought of my father-in-law as a wrongdoer, and I knew that having this information could lead to problems beyond just Christine following me. Then I realized I had an advantage. You were right about it drawing more attention, I said. Norton's bodyguards will do anything to get it back. It's a tricky situation, Smith said, looking uncertain. But getting away from my unfaithful wife is more important than leaving Dell and his crew in the lurch. The ledger matters, Paul, but let's talk about it later, I suggested. He nodded in agreement. I leaned in and spoke softly. So why did you take all that money? The robbers on the FBI S10 Most Wanted list didn't take half that amount. You're in serious company now. He looked down, embarrassed. I know, please don't remind me. So why take his money? I pressed. That's a big risk. I mentioned before I was upset and needed money to get away. I've never stolen anything, so I thought, why not? I pointed out, all those big bills made it easier. You know? I nodded. She told me everything. You knew how Dell left the safe combination. Her sister told me, Smith said, surprised. He took a big bite of chili and crackers, then continued. Rita takes cash from Dell's safe when she needs it. She bragged about it being easy, and when I doubted her, she said, just go to 35 and it opens. So I tried it that day and it worked. Wow, I whispered. You really went for it. Leaving, I took it all, he said. I would say so. Almost 96,000 is a lot, I said softly. Come on, Doug, it's just under 95, he whispered back. Oh, what a relief, I replied dryly. I think she owes me, he said firmly. Dell manages the family money, so I took it from him. We had 2 good years together, but the rest was terrible. While I was away, she really hurt me, he added. She ended our marriage. If you talk to her again, let her know. A man at the lunch counter turned his head a little to listen. Okay, calm down, I said, glancing around. Take a deep breath. After he settled down, I asked, what happened? Still upset, Smith said, what many do when their partner is gone. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied gently. At first, Christine tried to keep my spirits up. I got almost a letter a day at the start. Then when I was hurt, she must have gotten scared. I think she was more worried about herself than me. The letters dropped to one a month if I was lucky, a half page. When I got mail, I felt bad for being so let down if it was from anyone but my wife, he said sadly. He lit another cigarette, took a long puff, and exhaled slowly. Ruthie wrote more than my wife did, and so did Mom. Smith took a long sip of coffee and said, when other guys' letters stopped coming, we all figured out what that usually meant. I nodded. When I got one, I always thought it would be a goodbye. Some Marines reacted strongly when they got a letter like that. I remembered the lonely gunshots in the dark hours, when people feel the most lost. He continued, when I came home, Christine welcomed me with smiles, but something felt different. She had changed, and I was not the same person who had left. Our past was behind us, which is common for many couples. I wanted to go back to school on the GI Bill to study business, but we had some big disagreements about that. Smith looked frustrated. She thought I should be happy living off her family's money, enjoying a relaxed lifestyle filled with events. Until it wasn't. She even suggested I take up golf, he said with a grimace. You were the first to stand up to her expectations, right? I was the first to say it and truly mean it, he replied. School at TCU went well, and she seemed proud of what I was achieving. We were starting to heal our relationship. She didn't want children, which caused some stress, but we were making progress. That's when Rita came into the picture. Rita? I asked, puzzled. Rita and Christine don't get along, and there's always tension unless they're in public. They had a big fight a while ago, and Rita found a way to get back at Christine. He took a deep breath. Rita had a collection of photos ready to cause trouble for Christine. It was hard for any husband to see those pictures, but what she showed me next was even worse. He looked at me, his expression filled with sadness. Rita had photos of Christine with different men from almost the time I left. Some were from social events, which were just annoying, while others were taken at private gatherings. They were not what a husband would want to find. You could sense a closeness in those images. Midway through the collection, most were of her with one man in particular. Then, she showed me more recent photos taken from a distance. They weren't inappropriate, but it was clear something wasn't right. There were scenes of them together by a hotel pool, entering a suite and relaxing on a couch. You could almost feel the gap created by the missing wedding ring. I think you understand that kind of investigation, right? I do, I responded quietly. I had seen these reactions from my clients before, and they never got easier. Then came the hardest part. Rita told me about Christine's trip just before I returned home. She had a stack of receipts and papers that left no doubt. Smith became quiet and clasped his hands together, shaking slightly. I understood that gesture and his deep, slow breathing. To a nice place in the country? I guessed softly. It was a polite term for something much darker, a safe spot for those worried about their reputation. He nodded slowly. Whose? I asked gently, feeling his sadness. I could see the quiet acceptance in him, a shield for tough times. He stirred the cold chili and took a big spoonful. Chewing slowly, he stared into the night, lost in thoughts from the past few years. Finally, he whispered, the same guy in many of those photos, Arthur Grant. He's a minor partner of Dell's, a follower, really. Grant ran their hauling business, and as an important worker, he didn't have to join the military. He laughed bitterly. The worst part of him is hidden behind a smile. I understand the type, I said softly. I went looking for him, Smith said. He ran away and went back to wherever in Memphis his family came from. With me gone, he'll feel free to return. So Rita shared details about her sister, I said. Smith nodded seriously. It seems Christine and Grant were involved before I returned, but they started up again last year. He took a long drag on his cigarette and said, I suppose I just wasn't exciting anymore. When I found out, we had a big argument. She confessed everything but claimed she still loved me. I told her my love was gone, and that crushed her. I moved into an empty apartment above the garage, Smith continued. After searching for Grant and finding nothing, I came up with my plan. Dell was away for the weekend and Christine was upset. I took the money and the records and left. We sat in silence for a moment. The radio played a soft version of Goodnight Irene. Smith looked up at me, his eyes calm and his hands steady. "Here's how I see it," I said. "We know it won't end well if Christine and her friends come looking for you." I shook my head. "I can't let that happen." Smith said, "I've considered a deal, the ledger and money for my freedom." I frowned. "Don't you see, Doug? Christine wants everything her way. She wants you, the ledger, and the money. No deals for her," I explained. "That's why you need to leave quickly, and I'll help cover your path." "You're right. I don't want to go, but I have no choice," Smith admitted. "You're escaping, not running away. There's a big difference, and you know it," I said firmly. He nodded as he thought about the situation. "Thanks, Doug," Smith whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." "Well, Paul, it's what I have to do." I took a deep breath and said, "I can't remember who said it, but someone once told his men before a big fight, 'Any man who stands with me is my brother.'" I chuckled softly. "I wasn't very good in school, but you understand what I mean." He smiled kindly. "Yes, that was Shakespeare's Band of Brothers speech from Henry V." I nodded as if I understood and stored that information for later. "Thanks, smart guy," I joked. Then more seriously I asked, "Passport?" Smith chuckled softly. "Thank Christine for that. I was home for a week, and she took me to the post office to apply for one. She had plans to travel, but, as you can imagine, I wasn't eager to go anywhere." "Yeah, the war took away my desire to travel as well," I agreed. "Do you have a visa for New Zealand?" When I left Fort Worth, I stopped in Washington before she could miss me. He took a deep breath and smiled. "With money, you can make things happen quickly. I spent 3 days at their embassy, got my papers, and booked a train to Houston. I've been here ever since." Just after midnight, we called a cab. It dropped me off at my hotel on Washington Avenue before taking Smith back to his rented room. We made plans to meet at the same coffee shop for breakfast around 9 the next morning. Part of me wondered if he'd change his mind, but I knew that Smith's best chance to get away clean was to trust me. He confirmed that the next morning in the diner when he waved me over to his booth. He smiled, looking relieved, and I sensed he had the same concerns about trust. "Good morning, Doug," he said cheerfully. He pulled out the comics from the Chronicle and slid them over. "You have to read Dagwood and Blondie," he insisted. "I'm really going to miss the funny papers." Before me sat a visibly changed man, and I knew he felt the same. Not long after, the counterman placed 2 hot breakfasts in front of us and refilled our coffee mugs. He was expecting me to be there on time, which made me smile as I laughed at Blondie's amusing antics. After breakfast, I pointed out several issues with Smith's escape plan, especially leaving behind a complicated situation with time to worry about it. I needed to cover up the clues he had left, like the letters at his mother's house, and the information he told the steamship agent. I planned to deal with both and tidy up his room. My skills in locating people would now help me hide his tracks. "Write a note for your mother telling her to destroy the letters in front of me. We need to cover that whole paper trail. But someone might still be tempted to talk, so what should we do about that?" I asked. Smith shook his head slowly. "Don't worry. Ruby is Mom's older sister, but she relies on Mom completely. Since Granny passed away, Ruby hasn't left Mom's side," he explained. He felt that with his mother's help, she and I could persuade Ruby to stay quiet. "I'm sending Mom some money with you," he said, holding my gaze for a moment. There was still a hint of hesitation in trusting me. "Put some of it in the bank and keep the rest in a safe place." I wasn't completely sure, but Smith promised me Aunt Ruby didn't know his plans. I added, "Remember, I'm at risk too. If Ruby talks, it could ruin my job. If they connect me to this mess." I made a cutting gesture across my neck. I thought about stepping back on Christine. I felt conflicted, but I knew my pride was just getting in the way. Deep down, I understood this was the right choice. "I get it," he said. But I have your back, too. His calm gaze made me feel more at ease. I smiled and nodded. All right. Trust needs to go both ways. When it comes to the agency, money has always made a difference, I mentioned. Smith agreed with a chuckle. If Christine only knew she and her dad helped me get away. Right. I never thought about that, I said, taking a bite of my eggs. Smith had some things to do, including sending a message to Ruth and preparing to leave at 1 p.m. on Saturday. We planned to meet at my hotel room on Friday evening. After an early dinner at a nearby BBQ place, we returned to my small room on the third floor of the Mercury Arms Hotel on Washington Avenue. He opened a suitcase on my bed and took out 3 large manila envelopes and a few smaller ones. He flipped over the top envelope to reveal Patricia Smith written on it. This is $12,000 for Mom and Aunt Ruby. There's also a letter for her explaining our conversation, he said. This is just for her. My name was on the second envelope. He chuckled when he saw my reaction. This is $12,000 for you, he said kindly. I gaped at him. Oh no, I can't accept this. I stammered. Come on, Doug, you deserve it. After all the hard work you've done and for helping me get away, you turned down part of Dell's money plus $2,000 to help me and Ruthie. So this is rightfully yours. He smiled gently. It's just coming from me instead of them. I don't know what to say. It's easy, he grinned. Thanks, I replied, feeling grateful. He took 4 addressed legal-size envelopes and placed them in his suit pocket. There's a mailbox on the corner. I'll drop these before the last pickup. Letters? I asked, curious. Smith laughed. Not exactly. He cleared his throat. People here have treated me really well. So, 3 of them, Pete, Chet, and Mrs. Hendricks, are thank you notes with a little something extra for them. They deserve it. For Vopel, I can manage with a postal money order and a simple note. Counting on his fingers, he said, Pete's wife needs dental work, Chet needs help with his truck, and Mrs. Vopel needs a new roof. He looked away, a bit uncomfortable. Money can be tough to handle, Doug. It only helps if you share it, I said with a friendly pat on Smith's back. You're a good person, I added. It's not really my money, he said, looking humble. Then he picked up the 3rd large envelope and said, This one is the hardest. He pointed to my envelope and continued, Deliver this, and you'll earn what's in that one. What's inside it? I asked, wanting to know. Smith's face turned serious. Mr. Grant's future, he replied. What do you mean? I pressed for more information. Smith sighed and sat down in the old chair. All right, since I trust you, here it is. Moving this much money out of the country is tricky. It comes from unusual sources. It's not exactly illegal, but carrying this much cash raises questions. This kind of money has its own ways, so I've had to deal with people we might not like. I know those types, I admitted. In Galveston, there are some things going on that are allowed. Gambling, alcohol sales, everything works there. Tourists expect it, and the island gains from their visits. The people in charge there, Sam and Rose Maceo, know how to handle money like this. I got $60,000 in bearer bonds from companies in Australia and New Zealand. This envelope has $1,000 for another of their associates, about whom I know little. I have a deal with his boss. Drop this off at Old Jack's Grill on 57th and ask for Cuddy. Say it's from Mona, and he'll understand. Got it? I nodded and repeated the instructions. He pulled out a smaller envelope. Here's a key to a safe deposit box that's paid for 4 years. You can keep anything private from Christine or anyone else there. It has a ledger and a card with a street address. Just remember the name Nelson, New Zealand. That's near where Ruthie lives. A place where you can find some peace, my friend. I also put your name on the bank account. He handed me a yellow card. Here's the signature card. Sign it and drop it off on Monday. I took my name off the account, but it has $23 in it to keep it open. About the ledger. I started to ask. I trust your choices, Doug, he interrupted. Do what you think is best. Feeling a burst of energy, I straightened up. What can I do for you, sir? I asked playfully. Ha! He laughed. Take care of things, Sergeant. Yes, sir. I smiled and gave a quick salute, which he returned. Smith chuckled at my enthusiasm. Wearing no uniform and just the 2 of us indoors. I can keep a secret if you can. Sir, I said with a smile. I packed everything into the dispatch rider's case and took it with me. On our way to a small bar just off Washington Avenue, we stopped by the mailbox. For a few hours, we talked like old friends, sharing a mix of sadness, hope, and some worries. Our conversation remained light. After finding his missing brother, saying goodbye felt heavy, but we knew that even friendly letters came with risks. The weight of our separation reminded us of the losses we had both experienced before, but our meeting had brought positive changes to our lives. A good man and woman were beginning anew. As for me, I was ready to help bring wrongdoers to justice. I also stood a bit taller, feeling proud of my work. The Port of Houston, Texas, Saturday. I got my car from the lot near my hotel and picked up Smith at the boarding house. The drive to the port was filled with the same cheerful chatter we had the night before. We pushed aside the sadness we had felt. The excitement reminded me of the moments before we set out on a journey. The S. Wairata, a 5,295 GRT freighter with New Zealand flags, was docked at the public piers near the turning basin just off Clinton. The ship, powered by twin diesel engines, had been launched in 1943 nearby and had previously sailed under a different name. Smith used a dockside payphone to call his mom at the drugstore where she worked. He talked to her for nearly an hour. I dashed to the snack bar a couple of times to buy change for the phone. "You think that was a good idea?" Smith asked. "It's just a payphone at the docks, so you're fine," I replied. "You said it yourself, New Zealand is as far away as can be," I joked. We kept chatting until the customs agent allowed the ship to board its waiting passengers. "Well, here we are," I said with a smile. "Next time this ship comes back, Ruth will be here." "Yeah, it feels like a dream," he said, smiling back. He seemed a little uneasy and added, "And I really appreciate everything you've done, Doug. Thanks for helping me out. It's hard to explain." "Paul, no need to explain. I did what I had to do for both of us." I held out my hand for him to shake, and he did firmly before pulling me into a warm hug. As we stepped apart, I said, "Semper Fi, my brother." He answered, "Always faithful, my friend." I watched Paul as he showed his passport and visa to the customs and immigration officer at the dock. I waited a little longer as a tugboat pulled away the fuel barge tied next to us, and the crew busily prepared the ship for its journey. Finally, the workers pulled the gangplank away from the Wairata. Smith came out of his cabin and stood quietly at the railing. As the workers untied the boat and the tugs began to help, Paul smiled and touched his hat in thanks. I returned the gesture, and it felt like we were in sync. We nodded, turned, and walked away. This marked the start of Paul Smith's new journey away from a troubled relationship and towards the caring support of a good woman. I still had a long way to go to make things right. Later that afternoon, I joined the weekend crowd driving down US 75 to Galveston. After renting a room a few blocks from the beach at a motel on 53rd Street, I walked to the seawall and enjoyed a seafood dinner with the cool sea breeze. Looking out at the dark Gulf of Mexico, I smiled, thinking that Doug was somewhere across the water. Later that night, I passed Old Jack's Grill on 57th Street between Avenue S and Avenue S 1/2. Old habits can be hard to shake. Even though I was nervous about giving the envelope to Cuddy, I slept better than I had in weeks. Maybe it was the refreshing sea breeze, or the feeling that I had done something good. On Sunday morning, around 10:30, I walked into Old Jack's to the sound of cowbells ringing as the door opened. The smell of fried seafood and cleaning supplies mixed with the fresh spring air outside. An older woman with red hair opened the tall windows, letting the cool breeze come in. "Morning," she called out. "We're about to serve Sunday lunch, but if you're hungry now, we might have some biscuits, grits, and sausage gravy left." "No thanks, ma'am. I'm here to see Cuddy," I replied. She finished opening the last window, secured it, and wiped her hands on her apron before looking at me and saying, "All right, Honorable. Let me get him for you." A few minutes later, a small man with dark skin came out of the kitchen, wiping his face with a towel. "Yes, sir, how can I help you?" he asked with a slight accent. I took the envelope from my bag and handed it to him. "This is from Mona." My heart raced, and my throat felt dry. He wiped his hands again and felt the envelope, then nodded. "You tell her she better get back home soon." He winked and walked away. As I stepped into the restaurant, the older woman said, "You sure you won't eat something?" Her blue eyes sparkled. "No, thanks. I just had breakfast a little while ago." "Well, come back for lunch and try our best shrimp plate on the whole Gulf Coast," she smiled. Instead, I headed back to the mainland. Houston, Texas. Monday afternoon, wrapping up my tasks in Houston took all morning. I visited the steamship office and left with $70 less, but I had proof that Paul Smith had bought a one-way ticket on the SS Wairata. Was it foolproof? Not really. The agent might remember Paul Smith differently. Still, I had done all I could. Next, I took the signature card to the bank, added $50, and put the money in the safe deposit box. I wrote down some names, dates, and amounts from the records. Then, I made a phone call, hoping to end my connection with Christine Smith. After a few moments, the operator said, "You can go ahead, Mr. Winter." "Good afternoon, this is Doug Winter," I said. "That's what the operator said," Christine replied, sounding a bit annoyed. "Did you find him?" "No, he's not in Houston or Richmond, which is a bit southwest of here," I replied. "Richmond? Texas?" she exclaimed. "Why there? What about the whole Golden Bay thing? I thought you were the best at this." "I am," I said. "But as you said, Paul is clever and resourceful." "Doug, Daddy wants his money, and I need my Paul," Christine said, clearly upset. "Plus, I need to talk about other charges." As I listened, I felt relieved thinking about Paul Smith moving further away from her. "I think the people in California have the best chance of finding him since I have no leads on where he went." I paused. "Honestly, I'm out of ideas. I can keep searching, but at this point..." She took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for trying. Please let me know if you have any ideas." I wanted to feel sorry for her, but it was hard to muster. When we finally hung up, she released me from her task and agreed to send the rest of my payment and expenses. However, there was no reward or boost to my reputation. While I felt a bit ashamed, I also felt accomplished for having taken the money from Smith. I spent 2 hours looking through old newspaper archives at the Houston Library near City Hall. This led me to the name of a reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram who had been investigating illegal activities in Fort Worth during the war. Just about 5 o'clock, the phone outside my hotel room rang. The operator had found the reporter, and after I put in some coins, I spoke with Harry Dickinson. "Are you still looking into the illegal traders from the war?" I asked him. "Who is this?" he replied, sounding tired but curious. A reporter probably got many unusual calls. "My name isn't important, but I have a ledger that shows Del Norton and his group were stealing supplies going to Camp Bowie and Carswell Air Base during the war." It felt good to share this information and let the tension fade away. The man kept careful records, including notes on payments to... I read him several names, amounts, and dates from my notebook. Also, the surprising part is that he made them sign for those payments. "Where are you? How did you find this out? Relax, it's safe, and only I know where it is. Here's what we will do." Corsicana, Texas. Thursday afternoon, I met with Dickinson, an FBI agent named Burris, and a U.S. attorney named Jankowski at a small hotel in Corsicana, located just off US 75 between Houston and Dallas. 2 federal marshals stood guard outside the room. After less than 20 minutes in the warm room, Burris looked up from the logbook with excitement. "Mr. Winters, we've known some of this since 1942, he said, tapping the book lightly. "But we never had the proof." He chuckled cheerfully. "Do you know what it's like to chase something for so long and finally find it? Do you?" Dickinson stood behind him, smiling widely. "We've got them." "Yeah, I know how it feels," I thought. "It feels good, I'm sure," I said. It was their time to celebrate. I had an agreement with the authorities that Harry Dickinson would have the exclusive story, and everyone involved would keep my involvement a secret. To the people on the black market, I was invisible. Of course, in the Norton camp, they would think this was Paul Smith's final act. The aftermath. The authorities kept their promise. Harry Dickinson and the Star-Telegram published a special afternoon edition the day the conspirators were arrested, featuring booking photos. Other newspapers scrambled to catch up in the following days, much to the annoyance of the Dallas papers. Their coverage grew stronger when it became clear that the main hub of this crime was Fort Worth, a city they disliked. After the initial charges, all 8 members of the Camp Bowie group, as the media called them, were released on bond and went into hiding. Arthur Grant missed Rita Norton's birthday party the next weekend, which surprised many. Hearing that made me feel guilty, even though I was just a messenger in this already settled matter. When Grant missed his first court hearing 10 days later, everyone thought he had run away from justice. His friends and lawyers, who seemed to know what was happening behind the scenes, didn't agree. For all his mistakes, Arthur Grant was not unwise. The best bounty hunters in the Southwest scoured the area, trying to capture him and claim the $30,000 bond. They found other wanted people, but Grant was still nowhere to be found. The large Texas congressional group, all loyal New Deal Democrats, showed once again that party loyalty was more important than anything else. Skeptics, who likely had a point, suggested this showed that those involved in the black market carefully shared their illegal earnings. The federal judge in this case stepped down because he knew 3 of the defendants. A new judge appointed by Truman and several U.S. attorneys from the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. were in charge of the cases. I wish I could say that Delbert Norton and the others faced tough prison time, but sadly, they knew too much about important people. People talked about how their actions reached different levels of government and went beyond Texas. Unbelievably, they allowed Norton and the 6 others to say they did not contest 5 of the 8 charges. They justified this by saying these were respectable men with good backgrounds and no criminal records. Public anger rose, played out, and then faded away as new stories took over the news. They admitted to conspiracy, tax evasion, and wrongful gain during times of conflict. All 5 received sentences that did not require jail time, lasting from 5 to 7 years, with Dell getting 9 years. According to the agreements, they paid back the full amount of $987,866 recorded in the ledger. They also paid interest, fines, and penalties totaling 70% of that amount. Lastly, depending on the individual amounts involved, they settled all overdue income tax bills along with interest and penalties. Even after the government took this significant amount of money, these men stayed wealthy and largely unaffected. Those they had protected made sure they felt some consequences, but it wasn't too harsh. They faced the most awful punishment for people in power and with wealth: embarrassment. Once a month, they had to sit with regular offenders while waiting to meet with their probation officer. As felons, they also lost certain rights. In public, they were shown to be no different from those they often looked down upon. The many hard-working and honest people these upper-class individuals typically dismissed turned out to be more admirable in important ways. Most importantly, they brought shame to their class, as many others engaged in unethical behavior, but were careful enough not to keep a detailed record of their wrongdoings. This weighed heavily on Norton, whose arrogance and carelessness led to their downfall. Among wrongdoers, Norton and his partners looked quite ordinary. Connections they had built and protected over the years vanished due to political and social hypocrisy. Memberships in clubs, organizations, and political groups were lost. They lost seats on several boards and their positions in companies. The pews in churches stood empty. Memories faded completely, much like how history was erased during Stalin's rule. For those who desire power and control, this was almost worse than not being remembered at all. Amid the chaos of the trials and media attention, Christine Norton Smith left for Nevada and quickly finalized her divorce. She returned home as Christine Norton to take care of her father. What about Christine and Rita? There may be no connection, but shortly after Christine's return, Rita had a terrible fall down the stairs in the Norton mansion, breaking several ribs and an arm. After a long recovery, Rita moved to her father's nice bungalow, where she became prominent in the local social scene. During this time, I took care of Mrs. Smith and her sister Ruby. I helped manage her money and set up a discreet mail service from New Orleans so she could write to Paul without revealing his location. Pat Smith and I burned any letters from Paul that mentioned Ruth or gave hints about where Paul was. In October 1948, a tip to the Dallas police led detectives to a body buried on a farm near St. Joe, Texas. They identified Arthur Grant through his dental work and the license plates from his missing car. He had died from 2 shots to the back of the head with a gun found nearby. Some found loaded dice in his pants pockets. suggesting he might have angered the wrong people in Dallas's illegal gambling scene. But I knew more about the situation. Christine Norton wondered if Paul was involved, but she pushed that thought aside along with her guilt, focusing instead on the evidence of the dice. She began looking for signs of her missing men. Harry Dickinson started writing a book called The Fall of the Camp Bowie Cabal. Foolishly, I met him several times in secret to share what I knew about Paul and Christine. Mrs. Dickinson assisted him with typing and editing the book. She praised the great background details he used for the final version, and he mentioned me without revealing my identity. After all, many husbands trust their wives with secrets. The book became a bestseller, and Lois Dickinson enjoyed the fame they found at a New Year's party on the last day of 1948. A woman wanted to impress the right people at a fancy event. She didn't handle champagne well on an empty stomach, and she had a big secret. One of the people she impressed reached out to Christine. The caller said, Lois Dickinson's husband mentioned a local private investigator had found that ledger. That changed everything for me. On Monday, January 3rd, Christine called Dickinson. He firmly said that his wife was wrong. His strong denial only made her more suspicious. To his credit, he warned me right away. News spread fast, and by the end of the week I had lost both of my jobs. A friend at the Fort Worth Police Department informed me that the White brothers and Juke Wesley were searching for me. An attorney for one of the cabal members even asked the police about me, saying they just wanted to talk. I had a feeling that told me to run. Christine was eager for details, and many others wanted to get involved because of the chaos the ledger caused. It didn't matter that they were all involved too. I felt like the target now. I went into hiding for over 2 months, moving between New Orleans and Houston with a brief trip to Washington, D.C. I booked travel and got a visa and permit for New Zealand. With cash and 2 steamer trunks, I boarded a freighter in Baltimore heading to Japan via the Panama Canal. In Panama City, I switched ships and took the SS Waitomo to Auckland. Nelson, New Zealand, April 5th, 1949. Nelson was the first stop on the bus coming from Picton, where the ferry from Wellington arrives. As the bus pulled up, I saw Ruth Smith, looking just like I had pictured her. She was nearly as tall as Paul, with curly red hair dancing in the cool autumn breeze. She looked happy and full of joy. Next to her, Paul Smith still looked as handsome as ever, even more fit, and he seemed just as cheerful. He held a young girl with strawberry blonde hair, wearing a hat like her mom's. The little girl was clearly attached to her dad. Paul's big smile showed me all I needed to know. He was healthy, happy, and complete. I craved that feeling. When I got off the bus, he greeted me warmly and then turned to Ruth, saying, "Darling, meet Doug Winter. My friend, hero, and fellow Marine," he added. Ruth stepped forward and hugged me. "Welcome to your new home, Mr. Winter. You're going to love it here." Then, a woman who looked a lot like Ruth came out of the little bus station with a hot cup of tea. Paul's face lit up and he said, "Ah, Amelia, you made it." Ruth took Amelia's arm and brought her closer. "Sis, this is Doug, who we've been telling you about." When she shook my hand, we shared a look that felt meaningful, like a strong connection between us. I whispered to Paul, "I guess it runs in the family." And that's how my life changed. Story 2. A simple story about a hard-working trucker and his unfaithful wife. When he first met her, she was a cute 19-year-old secretary. She had just finished her studies at Oakleaf Votech and earned a certificate in office management. Her big brown eyes, shoulder-length blonde hair, and round face gave her a youthful charm. Her smile had a hint of fun. At 5 feet 2 inches tall, she was a bit on the short side. He was 27, tall and handsome, with thick brown hair, bright blue eyes, and a warm smile. Standing at 6 feet 3 inches, he had strong shoulders, even if his work clothes were a bit dirty from the long day. "Can I help you?" Carol Cooper asked. "Yeah, I need to see if Tom's free to meet Edgar Carroll," Ed said with a smile. "I heard you," Tom Mills called from his office. "He's ready for you now," Carroll informed him. 1993 Peterbilt 379, Ed said as he entered the insurance office. "How many miles?" Tom asked, already writing down details. 104, Ed replied, settling into one of the low chairs. The two men finished their paperwork, and Ed wrote a check. They then caught up on the latest news. "Oh, I heard Frankie's getting married," Tom asked. "Girl from Alabama?" Ed replied, shaking his head in surprise. "Serena? No, he's marrying someone named Allison Childress," Tom explained. "No way. Well, good for him. But what happened to Serena?" Ed wondered. "You mean my girlfriend?" Tom said, trying not to smile. "And a pretty girl, too," Ed quickly added. "By the way, I forgot to mention, premiums are going up next month," Tom said. "Really? Going up, huh?" Ed replied, surprised. "Now, if you were to say you're sorry," Tom playfully suggested. "Sure," Ed smiled. "See you later," Ed finally said after they ran out of things to discuss. Carol quickly closed the game of solitaire she had been playing on the office computer. Ed smiled at her, and she smiled back. His clothing didn't impress Carol Cooper much, but his confident attitude was attractive. His broad shoulders fit his shirt well, and she noticed his thick brown hair was tied back in a ponytail. "Who was that?" she asked Tom. "Edgar Carroll," Tom said. "He's a friend from school. He once stood up for me when someone was bothering me. When I opened Oakleaf Insurance, he was the first person I helped." He smiled at Carol, noticing her youthful look. Her dress seemed a bit short for work, but he decided to let it go for now. "Want me to tell him you like him?" Tom joked. "I'm not sure," Carol replied honestly. "Mom has been asking me to watch Annabelle while I'm here." A customer walked in, and both Carol and Tom turned to greet him. "Hey, I see you're still here," Ed said as he entered the office a few weeks later. "Don't you have mirrors where you live?" Tom joked. "They all broke the last time you were there," Ed replied, walking past Carol's desk. "And how's your lovely girlfriend?" "We're not together anymore. The drama got too much," Tom admitted as he shook hands with Ed. "What do you have for us this time?" "Service bay for Oakleaf County vehicles," Ed replied with a proud smile. "Really? You got that? That's great," Tom said, looking happy. "By the way, about that girl," Tom asked after they finished the paperwork. Ed gestured toward Carol's desk. "Yeah, you should think about asking her out," Tom suggested. Ed thought for a moment, glancing toward the door. Then he smiled and nodded. Carol quickly minimized her game when she heard Ed leave Mr. Mills's office. He smiled at her, and she shyly smiled back. "I can see you're really busy, so I'll keep this short," Ed said. "I'm planning to go to Stone Grill. They have great food. Want to join me?" Carol's eyes widened in surprise. The Stone Grill was a fancy place, and she had never been there. When?" Carol stammered. "Friday night. How about I pick you up at—" "Hey, Tom, what time does she finish here?" Ed asked. 5:30, both Carol and Tom replied. 7:30 works for me. That gives me time to get ready," Ed said with a smile. After he left, Carol quickly called her mom. Rose Cooper hesitated but agreed to watch Annabelle when Carol mentioned the restaurant. "Just know it's not Lionel taking you," Rose warned. "Mom, I haven't seen Lionel in forever," Carol replied. "Since he became a dad," Rose shot back. "Good thing your dad isn't." "Mom, I have to go. I have some customers just came in," Carol said, ending the call. "Where did those customers go?" Tom teased. "Poof, just disappeared," Carol smiled. Ed wished he had finished fixing the old 1951 Ford truck. Even if Carol didn't know much about cars, she would surely appreciate its classic look. Instead, he chose to drive his 1998 Eldorado. He had 2 young boys from the area clean it for him. "Wow, it's so shiny I can see my face in it," one boy said to Ed. "That's not your face. That's the dealership logo," Ed teased. "Aw, come on," the boy laughed. Carol was happy when Ed didn't just honk his horn outside. He actually came into the trailer to meet Rose and her 4-month-old daughter, Annabelle Marie. "Oh my goodness," Ed exclaimed with a smile at the baby. "Oh, you are such a lovely girl." "Yes, you really are." "Well, ma'am, she has a baby waiting for her at home, so she won't be out too late, okay?" Ed said to Rose. "Whenever you're ready is fine," Rose replied. "Is that your car?" Carol asked as they exited her mother's trailer. "I thought we might be in your truck." "You mean the big truck I just bought?" Ed laughed as he held the door for her. "No way. That's for long trips, not a night out." This is a Cadillac? Carol asked. Yep, last year's model, Ed agreed. The host seated them, and the waiter arrived at their table almost immediately after they sat down. We'll definitely have the wine, Ed said when the waiter mentioned the wine list. Unless you're too young? Ed joked as the waiter left to bring their fresh-baked bread. No one under 18 is allowed, Carol replied with a playful smile. Want to see my driver's license? Ed asked, making her laugh. As they enjoyed their delicious steaks and rich wine, they engaged in conversation to learn more about each other. He shared how he became a truck driver and that waiting for a truck was not something he enjoyed. Is that why you bought the truck that Tom is insuring? Carol inquired. She shared her own story about attending vocational school. She realized college was not the right fit for her, so she needed a skill to support herself. Carol talked about her high school crush, mentioning that he was also Annabelle's father. Ed empathized, recalling his own experience with a high school crush who had taken advantage of him. She used me to make someone else jealous, but I thought it was true love, Ed said, shaking his head sadly. Oh no, Carol said. Yeah, we were hanging out, and then the next thing I knew, the guy was confronting me while she just laughed, Ed continued. That sounds frustrating, Carol said. After they finished their meal and a tasty dessert, Ed suggested going to the local mini-golf course. Carol took his large, rough hand and looked up at him. Why don't we just go back to your place? She proposed. Carol's eyes widened as they turned onto Roberts Drive. Her head turned back and forth as they approached 1812 Roberts Drive. I come through here to see the Christmas lights, she said as Ed parked in the garage. Yeah, my uncle left this place to me, Ed explained. Without waiting for a tour, Carol dashed through the house as soon as Ed opened the door. She looked into the bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen, living room, and den. Then she spotted the large swimming pool and hot tub through the atrium doors. Ooh, can we go swimming? She asked, already moving toward the doors. Sure. Do you have a swimsuit? Ed asked. What? It's dark out here. Carol laughed, pretending to prepare for the water. Ed grabbed 2 towels and got ready to join her. Carol popped up and smiled at him. I should have said something earlier, Ed said with a light tone, trying to keep things fun. But they have alligators in the pool. Alligators? Carol gasped. Yep, Ed replied playfully. Look, there's one now. And another, he said, gently poking her to keep the laughter going. Ooh, and here's one, Carol giggled, enjoying the fun. Yikes! Those pesky little things, huh? Ed chuckled, and they kept their playful chat alive. As she swam to the ladder, Ed watched her step out of the pool, her happy spirit shining through. She grabbed a towel and looked back at him. Anyone watching back here? Carol asked with a teasing tone. Nope, Ed answered, enjoying the moment as she pulled him toward a lounge chair. Why? She asked, her face showing confusion. It's Annabelle's birthday, Ed replied. I wouldn't miss that. Ed, Carol, Rose, Tom, and Emily, Tom's latest girlfriend, were the only ones at the small party. Annabelle didn't mind at all. She laughed and chatted happily while everyone celebrated her. Ed's gift for the girl was a tricycle with a big truck logo on it. Oh no, my little one is not going to be a truck driver like you, Carol laughed. What? There are worse jobs, Ed replied, placing a cap on the girl's head. Annabelle looked at Ed and smiled, her cheerful grin lighting up the moment. That looks great on her, Tom said. Yeah, Carol Eunice Cooper being a truck driver isn't the worst thing, Rose added. Could be working fast food. Taco place, Carol corrected. Meanwhile, Ed was busy showing Annabelle how to ride the tricycle. She beamed at him, even playfully pinching his nose. No, sweetheart, hands on the handlebars, Ed encouraged. Feet on the pedals and whee! As they left the small party, Emily turned to Tom and said, Do you think Carol was waiting for someone else to come? I had that feeling too, Tom agreed. When it was Ed's turn to go, Carol gave him a tight hug and whispered, I love you. Love you too, Ed replied. The next time she visited, Ed brought Annabelle and her tricycle in the car. The trailer park had a bumpy drive, not really the best for a little girl learning to ride. On his long driveway, Ed squatted and rolled Annabelle around and around. Finally, when his knees felt like they might not work again, he lifted the little girl into his arms. "Dada!" she squealed with joy. "Just wait until you see the swimming pool, sweetheart," Carol said with excitement, looking at her happy daughter. Since it was still light outside, Carol put on a swimsuit. Ed thought it was nice that she got ready to enjoy the day. He further impressed her by changing a diaper before handing the little girl back to her mother. Then Ed changed from his jeans and shirt into swimming trunks. Mother and daughter sat on the steps while Ed entertained them, splashing in the water and making silly gestures. "Okay, you two can stay out here as long as you like, but I'm going to start cooking our burgers," Ed announced. Annabelle pouted and reached for Ed, so everyone had to get out of the pool, dry off, and head inside the house. Carol put a dry diaper on Annabelle and then joined Ed in the big kitchen. "Daddy, huh?" Carol teased Ed. "Hey, she started it," Ed replied with a smile. That night, as Annabelle slept on her mat, Carol and Ed shared a tender moment. A few months later, Carol found out she was going to have a baby. This time, the father was supportive. He didn't deny his role and agreed to help her. This time, he spent $7,000 on an engagement ring. Carol wore the beautiful platinum ring with diamonds and sapphires proudly at her desk at Oakleaf Insurance. Tom was with Carol when she felt something unusual. He took her to the hospital when she felt very uncomfortable. From the hospital, Tom called the dispatcher at Oakleaf Freight to tell Ed that Carol had lost the baby. Ed finished his delivery to Portland, Oregon quickly and returned 2 days after Carol came home from the hospital. "I guess you want this back," Carol said sadly, struggling to take off the ring. "What? Why?" Ed asked, his eyes filled with tears. "Because I'm not pregnant anymore," Carol said, then began to cry. Their wedding was a simple ceremony at Friendship Christian Church in Sweet Oak, Texas. Neither Ed nor Carol went to church often, but Reverend Brandon Wright was understanding. "Are you members of my church? It's $50 for members and $100 for non-members," Brandon said. "A fair deal at any price," Ed said. Carol chose not to take Edgar's last name. She didn't even want to hyphenate it. "Really?" she said when Ed expressed concern. "Carol Carol or Carol Cooper Carol? That sounds so funny." "I don't care what her name is. Just get her out of my house," Rose joked. 2 years after their wedding, Carol became pregnant again, but it also ended in loss. Carol talked to Ed about a medical procedure. "I don't think so, but thanks for the thought," Ed replied. So they decided to be careful, until the last moments, when Ed would take risks. "Ed, why did you park that big truck right in front of our house?" Carol said sharply as she walked into the house. She was talking about a shiny new Peterbilt 379 tractor. "Because it doesn't fit in the garage," Ed replied, looking up from where he and Annabelle were playing with Legos. "Can you please park it down at the yard and use your other car?" Carol suggested, going up the stairs with a heavy step. "Yeah, great to see you too. I missed you. Boston is a long drive, but I made it back quickly," Ed said. Carol then realized she had been too harsh. Ed had been gone for 4.5 days, and instead of greeting him warmly, Carol had met him with sharp words. "Those trucks help pay the bills," Ed said from the doorway of their bedroom. "I got a raise," Carol replied, her earlier regret fading fast before she could say sorry. "That helps with the light bill, maybe," Ed thought but didn't say it out loud. By the time they finished dinner, bathed Annabelle, and finally got the baby to sleep, Carol felt ready to reconnect with her husband. "You must be tired from your day," Ed noticed, seeing a change in her mood. "Yeah, it has been a long one," Carol answered, thinking back on her day. In the morning, Carol realized that even with the raise, she was not feeling satisfied at Oakleaf Insurance. Ed fed Annabelle while Carol pushed her grits and scrambled eggs around on her plate without appetite. "What do you think would make you happy?" Ed asked, wiping jam off Annabelle's hands. "Tom hired someone new, and I can't believe it, just because she has a broker's license. I know more than she does," Carol complained. "Let's keep it clean, okay? Little ears hear everything," Ed said, glancing at their daughter. "Like you've never said anything," Carol replied teasingly. "I try," Ed replied with a smile. He then looked at Carol. "Honey, If you want to go back to school, just let me know. If this new hire isn't good enough, I'm sure Tom would like your skills, he encouraged. She isn't good at all. Just the other day. Carol started again. I'm sure you could do really well there, Ed interrupted. The business has grown a lot since Tom started. Since Rose had a stroke and couldn't watch Annabelle anymore, the toddler now attended Stagecoach daycare. When Ed was on a long haul, Stagecoach took care of Annabelle from early in the morning until later in the evening. Annabelle was happy. She made friends there, but was always the happiest when Daddy was home to spend the day with her. Carol thrived as an insurance broker and was good at getting new clients for Oak Leaf Insurance. She could get frustrated when she had to pay household bills with her own money. Normally, Ed's presence, with his truck parked in front of the house for a few days, would ease her worries. She planned to help pay a bill, and Ed would then park the tractor at Oak Leaf Freight Lines. He did not like it when she used a bonus check for a down payment on a brand new car. She avoided looking directly at him. All this, getting licenses, permits, and registering, Ed said, his anger starting to show. It takes time. It seems like you've been thinking about this for a long time. Carol shifted in her seat and finally looked at Ed's worried face, but quickly looked away again. And I'm just now hearing about this? Ed asked, his voice tense. Well, I mean, Carol stumbled over her words. I guess you didn't want me to change your mind, Ed said, coming to the right conclusion. Finally, Carol met his gaze. Her expression showed she was upset. You're right, she said firmly. I knew if I talked to you, you'd try to change my mind. Just like with the car. Go ahead, Carol, do what you want, Ed sighed as his anger faded. Just make sure you can share the costs for everything and spend time with our daughter. Oh, I'll make time for her, Carol replied sharply. You don't need to worry about that. Like with her soccer games? Ed challenged. Honestly, how many games do they have? Carol complained. Does it matter? Ed asked. You haven't made time for any of them, so it doesn't matter if she has 1 game or 100. A few days later, Carol showed Ed the business cards they had printed. He looked at them with interest. Cooper Hahn Insurance Corporation was written in bold letters. To Ed, it seemed unprofessional and almost childish. But he kept this to himself and nodded at the phone number. Is this the best way to reach you? He asked. You should call my cell. It goes to a call center in India, Carol explained. What people liked about Oak Leaf was that when they called, they got Oak Leaf, Ed pointed out. He noticed that Carol was a bit embarrassed by his comment. He had just come in from a run and wanted to connect with her, so he added a different note. But then again, Oak Leaf was pretty small, right? He said as he put the card in his pocket. He and Carol shared a moment of closeness, and after she freshened up, they lay in bed together. She talked about the new computers they installed and the network they set up. And who is this Hahn anyway? Ed asked. Instead of answering, Carol said that Annabelle was interested in basketball. I'll put up a hoop tomorrow, Ed promised. What? I'll put it up. Carol sighed. She tries it a few times and then loses interest. Now I have something ugly in my driveway. You said the same about that soccer net in the backyard, but she uses it almost every day, Ed reminded her. They're just not nice to look at. I don't want a basketball hoop out front, Carol continued. Ed decided to talk to Cheryl Timmons, Grace's mother. Since Annabelle wanted to join, Grace also wanted to try basketball. Cheryl's husband, Frank, often had to work and couldn't teach their daughter much. We could have had a son, Cheryl smiled lightly. But go ahead. At least we'll know where they are, right? Ed bought the hoop, backboard, and post, along with 2 new basketballs. He showed Grace and Annabelle how to dribble and pass the ball. While he and Tom Mills set up the basketball hoop, the girls practiced. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Uncle Tommy, Annabelle said when the hoop was ready. How could I ever say no to you? Tom replied with a grin. What about dunking? How do you do that? Grace asked. Ed looked at the 4-foot-tall girl and then shared a laugh with Tom. Well, sweetheart, I've never dunked a basketball myself, Ed said. It's all about practice. The more you try, the better you'll be. Brother, you are a genius, Tom chuckled, as he and Cheryl joined Ed on the porch to enjoy drinks while watching the girls play. "Oh, almost," Cheryl cheered as one of Grace's shots missed just barely. Frank returned from work and heard from his wife and daughter how Ed had helped them. He walked over to the Carroll house. "So, how much do I owe you for the goal in the ball?" Frank asked. "Hey, Frank, want a drink?" Ed offered. "I can't say no to a cold one," Frank replied. "Frank, we know where the girls are. They're staying safe and getting some exercise," Ed said, knowing Frank was concerned about the expense. He pointed to his own tidy yard. "My wife wouldn't let us mess up the driveway. Your wife said, go right ahead. So, how much do I owe you?" Ed asked. "Another drink, and we'll call it even?" Frank suggested with a grin as he shook Ed's hand. When Annabelle and Grace started their freshman year at Sacred Ascension High School in Oakleaf, they quickly became known as the Tornado Defense. You could guard one of them, but the other would be ready to score. Annabelle was known for being a tough rebounder. Grace couldn't dunk, but she could shoot three-pointers with amazing skill. Carol attended one of Annabelle's games but found it too loud for her liking. Carol found the gym had an unpleasant smell, and she did not understand the game at all. It was just a lot of noise with people running back and forth. Just when she thought she knew who had the ball, they would run in the opposite direction. Next to her, Ed and Cheryl were cheering and laughing with excitement. "Did you see that?" Ed called out to Carol. Carol just wanted to go home, relax in a warm bath, and enjoy a glass of wine. "See what?" Carol asked. "Annabelle just took the ball. The other girl didn't even realize it," Ed replied. Oakleaf High School had a strong offense, but the Tornado Defense fought back hard. Annabelle blocked a shot, passed the ball to Grace, and Grace made a perfect shot that went straight through the net. "Yeah, that's how it's done!" Ed cheered. Soon, Ed had to leave for Miami, Florida. Outside Fort Walton Beach, a hurricane forming in the Atlantic looked like it would hit the area. Ed was redirected to Gulf Shores, Alabama, where another company would take over the shipment to Miami once the storm settled down. "Oh, you're home," Carol said as she saw him walk in. "Yeah, hurricane," Ed said simply. Carol hesitated, trying to step toward the doorway. "You've got something in your hair," Ed said calmly. "Guess whoever you're with doesn't lend you a towel, huh?" Carol set her purse down on the table without looking up. "I guess there's no easy way to say this," she mumbled. The divorce had been troubled. Carol had never allowed Ed to legally adopt Annabelle, so in the end, Ed did not get any time with his daughter. Carol insisted on a prenuptial agreement. They would each keep what they had brought into the marriage and split what they gained during it. But when Carol and Lionel started Cooper Hahn Insurance, she wanted another agreement, one that kept her business safe from divorce matters. If something happened to her, the business would go to Annabelle, with Lionel as her guardian. Ed had been upset by this agreement. He had met Lionel only a few times and did not think much of him. The short man with thinning hair had smirked when Ed mentioned he was a truck driver, but the smirk changed when Ed shared he had been truck driving for nearly 20 years. Ed had wondered how many jobs Lionel had held in that time. Even Carol had said that Cooper Hahn almost didn't happen. Lionel had started the business called Hahn Cooper Insurance and even printed a few thousand cards and letterheads with the logo. Ed's lawyer had taken the original paperwork and rewritten it, making sure that Ed and Lionel had to agree on any decisions about Annabelle's estate if something happened to Carol. Carol looked confused when Ed said that his own business should not be included. "Do I look like I want that old truck?" she asked while signing the document. Now, Ed and his lawyer, Teresa White, presented the document to Carol. She told her lawyer, Lenny Rosenberg, that she agreed. She wasn't interested in the truck Ed drove. Ed said the house would still be Annabelle's home while she was a student at Sacred Ascension High School, but after she graduated, Carol would have to leave, since it had been Ed's home before their marriage. "Unless Miss Cooper brings Lionel Hahn over for a visit," Teresa told Judge Howard Anderson, "then Miss Cooper must move out within 2 days." "What?" Carol said in surprise. "You can't tell me that." "It's my house," Ed said calmly. "I have every right not to want him here." "Mr. Carroll," Judge Anderson warned. "Well, Your Honor, what should I call him?" Ed asked. "He knew she was married but still chased after her. I don't want my daughter around someone like that." "She's not your daughter," Carroll shouted at Ed. You need to understand. She belongs to Lionel. After a moment of silence, Ed sighed. That's even more reason not to want him here, Ed said. Where was her father when she needed to learn to ride a bike? Where was he when she wanted to play soccer or basketball? Annabelle is already getting offers from 3 colleges. Where was Lionel when Tommy Bordelon broke her heart, leaving her feeling unworthy? Oh, give it up, Edgar Carroll, the great dad, Carroll replied mockingly. Please, just be quiet, Lenny asked his client. Annabelle was very sad when Ed and Carroll announced their divorce. She upset her mother by saying she wanted to live with Ed. When she learned she wouldn't get to visit Ed anymore, Annabelle felt hopeless. Carroll tried to be supportive, but eventually lost her patience. Grow up, okay? Carroll snapped. Do you think this is easy for me too? Lionel did try to talk with his daughter. Annabelle looked at him as they sat in the Pizza Hut restaurant. Your mom says you like basketball, Lionel said with a smile. Annabelle stayed quiet. Lionel's confident smile faded away. Say something, Annabelle, Carroll urged. Something, Annabelle replied without any emotion. That guy says I can't go to your house, but... Lionel began. My dad's not the problem here, Annabelle shot back. He's not your dad. You need to understand that, okay? Carroll exclaimed, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of others in the restaurant. He's not your dad. Lionel is. I mean, I don't expect you to call me dad or anything, Lionel said, feeling nervous as he noticed people looking at them. Good, Annabelle replied firmly. Lionel attended a basketball game and felt irritated when he saw Ed there. It upset him when Annabelle cheerfully called out to Ed and hugged him tightly. Go get him, Tornado. Ed smiled. Hi, Mr. Carroll, Gracie said shyly, blushing when Ed hugged her too. Both Lionel and Gracie's mother noticed how Grace seemed to have a crush on the charming driver. Lionel's irritation turned into anger toward Ed. The game was boring and confusing for Lionel. He watched the tall girls running up and down the court, bouncing a bright orange ball and cheering each other on. He wondered why their uniforms weren't more flattering. Ed and Cheryl cheered loudly for Grace and Annabelle from the stands. Lionel clenched his jaw as the 2 girls, along with some teammates, smiled at Ed. That was his daughter. He was her father. Annabelle Cooper should be smiling at him. The quiet girl hadn't even noticed he had taken time to come to this noisy game. When the buzzer went off, Lionel felt relieved. He stood up. So, who won? He asked the person next to him. No one yet. It's halftime, the woman replied. But Ascension is ahead by 12. How much longer does this go on? He asked, clearly frustrated. There are kids around. Maybe tone it down a bit? She suggested. Oh, whatever, Lionel said, annoyed, and walked away. A few months later, the divorce papers arrived at the small apartment where Ed lived. He owned the building and a nearby truck stop, along with a truck wash and repair shop. 9 of the 32 apartments were rented to fellow truckers. None of the people who rented from him or worked for him knew Edgar Carroll's true identity. He was just another trucker, an unknown face that dined at the truck stop a few nights each week. Just another trucker that filled up his vehicle at the depot. He was just a lonely man who sat and drank cold beers at Gearbox, a country bar popular with truckers. The beers were cold, the hamburgers tasty and greasy, served by friendly young women in casual clothes that added to the lively atmosphere. Ed felt a wave of tiredness wash over him as he read the dry, emotionless legal document. Just a few sheets of paper secured together, with a judge's signature. Deciding to visit the Gearbox, Ed hoped to brighten his mood with a cold drink and a tasty cheeseburger. He had first thought about going to a gym run by a former boxer to relieve some stress with a workout. But right now, enjoying a couple of cold beers felt more enticing. Treating himself to some comfort food seemed more suited to how he felt. Hi there, what would you like? A friendly woman with brown hair greeted him as he chose a table away from the jukebox. She had a warm smile and a round face. Ed noticed her slightly crooked teeth and wondered if she, like him, came from simple beginnings. A cold draft beer, please, Ed replied, trying to look her in the eye. Her hair was long and tied back in a ponytail with a few strands gently framing her face. She kept pushing her hair away from her eyes, which added to her charm. And I'll have the blue cheese bacon cheeseburger and some onion rings, Ed added, trying to lighten the mood. Sure thing, I'll take good care of you, she said with a playful smile. When she turned to get his order, Ed appreciated her cheerful attitude and the way she moved through the bar. When she came back with his bill for the burger, onion rings, and 2 beers, she kindly suggested a 20% tip. Ed handed her 2 $20 bills and told her to keep the change. I was going to give you a friendly gesture, she said, but for this. She leaned in and gave him a warm hug. After she pulled away, Ed felt a wave of feelings he didn't expect. Lisette, come on, don't be doing that here, Jimbo, the short bartender, called out over the noise of the other customers. Like I'd hug my dad like that, Lisette replied with a laugh. What did you do to earn that? I'd give you 100, Ed joked. Don't know, Lisette giggled. Give me 100 and we'll see what happens. What time do you finish your shift? Ed asked. She didn't answer but just laughed as she walked away. Ed left feeling flustered but smiling. However, when Ed returned to his small apartment, the papers were still on the table. This brought down his mood. Carol also received the papers. She didn't read them, just casually placed them on the counter with this month's utility bill and her car repair bill. Then she realized that, now that she was divorced, Ed's earlier request about Lionel spending the night was no longer valid. After dinner, and after sending Annabelle to her room to do her homework, Carol called Lionel. For Lionel, this was a moment of victory being in the space Ed had provided. It would also be rewarding to see Annabelle's reaction when she realized he was in the house. He was her father, and there would be no more denying it. Myrtle Owens, the retired school administrator from across the street, watched the situation. She shook her head as she saw the man park his car with a small suitcase. When Carol opened the door, Myrtle noticed the look Carol gave her. You can look at me however you want, Carol, Myrtle said. I'm not the one giving up a nice home for this. Thanks, Mrs. Owens, Ed replied when Myrtle called him on his phone. The next morning, Lionel sat at the breakfast table. He noticed Annabelle was not happy when a knock at the door caught Carol's attention. They exchanged worried glances. Can you get that? Carol asked. Lionel hesitated, but Annabelle's eager face made him walk to the door. Oh, good. Glad it's you, Teresa White, Ed's lawyer, said with a tight smile. According to the divorce agreement, you must leave right away. Carol Cooper. What do you want? Oh, it's you, Carol replied sharply to Ed's lawyer. Yes, it's me, Teresa smiled, pointing to the 2 police officers with her. Carol Cooper, you must move out of 1812 Roberts Drive within 48 hours. If you do not, these 2 will help you leave, and all your belongings will be put outside. Do you understand? You can't be serious. Ed and I are divorced now, Carol said in disbelief. It is clearly stated in the divorce agreement, Miss Cooper. Lionel Hahn cannot stay overnight at 1812 Roberts Drive, Teresa said. Remember, you have 48 hours. Thanks a lot, Mom, Annabelle called out to her mother, upset. With the police, Teresa took pictures of the inside of the home, noting its condition. After reminding Carol about the deadline, the lawyer left. I'm going to talk to him, Lionel vowed. And I'll remember you said that, Annabelle replied. After finishing her breakfast, Annabelle got ready for school. Carol and Lionel prepared for another day at Cooper Hahn Insurance. At the office, Carol discussed the idea of her and Annabelle moving in with Lionel. See, Lionel stumbled over his words. Oh, really, Lionel? You're still living with your mom, aren't you? Carol asked. Hey, it's paid for. It doesn't cost me anything to live there, Lionel said defensively. Rose reluctantly agreed that Carol and Annabelle could stay with her for a week. After that, Carol had to find a place of her own. And, I'm with Lionel, Carol carefully mentioned. If I see him near my house, I'll let him know, Rose Cooper promised. With what, Mother? Carol laughed a little. With your father's old shotgun, Rose replied. Ed was in Little Rock, Arkansas when his lawyer called with news about Carol's eviction. He thanked her, a bit distracted. Hey, what do you pay me for, right? Teresa joked. Tom Mills was the next to contact Ed. He shared his sympathy and recalled his own similar troubles. It was hard, you know. It felt like I lost everything, Tom shared. Thanks, Tom, Ed replied. By the way, I'm thinking about buying Levi's gym. Really? That place has a lot of problems. Seriously, think it over, Tom advised. He's still training fighters, right? Maybe look for something else to invest in. All right, I get your point, Ed laughed. Just think about it, okay? Help him out if you can, Tom suggested. Levi told Ed that the high cost of insurance was the reason he needed help. Tom mumbled, but prepared a policy for Levi. Wow, Levi smiled. That's nearly $1,000 less than what that Cooper Hahn place wanted. But I didn't buy it, Ed chuckled when Tom called to complain. You goof, Tom laughed. Oh, and Carol's out of your house. Teresa White walked through the house. She nodded, pleased that Carol and Lionel hadn't caused damage. She looked inside what had been Annabelle's room. The bed was made, but Annabelle's pillows and toys were gone. The closet was empty. The lawyer softly closed the door to the girl's room. The only things Ed kept to remember his mom by were the table and chairs in the breakfast nook. Carol hadn't touched Ed's office, so it stayed the same. Annabelle's room had 2 new pillows on the bed, similar to the old ones. Ed kept the door wide open, hoping his daughter would return someday. Through Lenny, Carol's lawyer, Ed offered any furniture Carol might want. Tell him I don't want anything from that guy, Carol replied. How about that desk in his office? Lionel suggested. Even with new furniture, the house felt heavy in Ed's heart. He drove to Levi's gym and worked out on a heavy bag for a while. Then he took a shower, put on clean jeans and a sweater, and drove to the gearbox to grab a bite. No way he's with me, Lisette said when she saw Ed sitting in Tiffany's area. Oh, no, he's not available. Just wait and see, Tiffany replied. Hey, come sit over here. This table has a much better view, Lisette said. What do you mean by better view? Ed asked, looking confused. Where he sat, he could see highlights from the last 51 Super Bowls. The table Lisette wanted him to move to showed a hockey game on one screen and a baseball game on another. A better view of the games, the girl grinned. Oh, in that case, you're right, Ed said. He ordered his regular meal, a cold beer and a blue cheese bacon burger with onion rings. Lisette chatted with him, showing her lively spirit. Here you go. Are you going to give me a big tip again? Lisette asked as she placed his bill in front of him. Ed put down a 20 to cover his meal and 2 beers, then added a $100 bill on top. Keep the change, he said, looking at her. Lisette glanced at the bill and then back at his friendly face. I finish at 11, she said. Need a ride home? Ed offered. Yes, she replied, putting the 100 in her pocket. That night, Tiffany took customers from Lisette's section a couple of times. Before it became a problem, Jimbo spoke up to stop both girls. I don't care who started it, I'm stopping this now, he said firmly. There are others who can take your spots. Got it, both girls replied quietly. Really mean it. Leave if there's any more trouble, he warned. Ed arrived in his nicely restored 1951 Ford F-150 truck. Lisette, now wearing a long T-shirt over her shorts, looked at the truck with interest. Ed opened the passenger door for her, and she got in. Is this a classic truck? She asked as Ed settled in. Yeah, he said. Oh, she said without much excitement. Where should I take you? Ed asked. Nothing seems open. I'm hungry, Lisette said. How about the Oakleaf truck stop? Ed suggested. Do you like omelets? Lisette asked. Yeah, but I don't think they serve omelets there, Ed replied. Let's stop by Burns unless you have everything at home, Lisette suggested. Ed paused, realizing he hadn't checked his refrigerator or pantry, so he didn't know what he had at home. At Burns & Burns grocery store, Lisette leaned close to Ed as they pushed their cart down the aisles, clearly wanting to stay near him. By the way, how old are you? She asked as they started placing items on the checkout counter. 41, turning 42 next month. Ed smiled. And you? You're old enough to be my dad, she replied. I'll be 20 in about 3 months, she said. Lisette might not have liked his truck much, but when he turned onto Roberts Drive, she brightened up. Oh, I love coming here at Christmas to see all the lights, she said. While Ed carried bags from the truck to the kitchen, Lisette started cooking some thick bacon. She chopped green onions and a tomato while the bacon sizzled. Can you pass me the half and half? Where's a mixing bowl? She asked. What's the difference between a big bowl and a mixing bowl? Ed wondered. One's what someone my age would call it. The other's what someone your age would call it, Lizette quipped, confidently breaking 5 eggs into the large bowl. That's a good one, Ed laughed as he continued bringing in the groceries. As she worked on the omelet and split it in half, Lizette shared that she didn't enjoy her job at the gearbox, saying it was better than her last job as a sales clerk at Valerie's Notions. The owner seemed interested in me for reasons that weren't about work, Lizette said. Valerie's? Oh, that's that little card shop on Pembroke, Ed replied. After cleaning up, Lizette asked where the restroom was, and Ed showed her to the small bathroom in his den. Lizette exclaimed, "Oh, I can't believe you." I wonder when she's working, Ed teased. Nah, don't you dare. Lizette laughed, her face lit up with fun. Don't you like me? She asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Like you a lot, Ed replied, finishing his coffee. You really do make a great cup of coffee. What are you up to today? Lizette asked, while picking up their breakfast plates. I need to pick up my truck. Had to get the transmission fixed, Ed explained. Then I'll get my log. Looks like I have a trip to New Orleans tomorrow. New Orleans? How long will that take? Lizette asked, curious. The whole trip? About 3 or 4 days, Ed said. I'll go from New Orleans to Memphis, then Atlanta, and back here. Lizette cleaned the stove and counters before hanging the wet dishcloth over the sink. Can I go with you? She asked, glancing out the kitchen window. What about your job at Gearbox? Ed questioned, hoping for more coffee. Working 6 or 7 hours on my feet for maybe $50? Gearbox can wait, Lizette replied. She leaned against the counter with a sigh. And Jimbo always says he can find someone else to do my job anyway. They don't need me. Well, you get off at 11 tonight? Ed asked as he placed his cup in the dishwasher. Yeah, will you pick me up? Lizette asked, playfully wrapping her arms around his neck. They shared a warm embrace, laughing as Ed lifted her happily. Seriously, do I need to tell anyone you're coming with me? Ed asked, a little worried about Lizette's father. No, just my roommate Michelle, but I don't think she'll mind. The rent is paid for this month, Lizette told him, admiring the Mercedes-Benz. Why did you pick me up in that truck? She asked, pointing. I'm not sure, Ed replied, happy to see her smile. He opened her door and added, I thought it would be nice for you to be with me for who I am, not just for my money. I'm not looking for that kind of relationship, Lizette said, slightly annoyed. I understand that now, Ed said, grinning. As they drove to her apartment, they shared a sweet moment. When they arrived, Lizette made him promise to pick her up from work that evening. After leaving the parking lot, Ed called Tom Mills. Tom, we own Oxbow Plaza, right? He asked. Off Pembroke? Yes, Tom replied. I've been trying to sell it. Why? The grass is too tall, the gutter is falling down, and there are 3 abandoned cars sitting there, Ed said. Paul said it looked fine, Tom sighed. What about the Pac Engo next door? Ed asked as he passed the store. Yes, Tom answered cautiously. There are 2 people asking for change right in front, and the cashier is just on her phone, Ed said, his voice getting sharper. Tom, what's going on? I'll call him, Tom promised. Tom, I know he's your sister's kid, but come on, Ed insisted. That night, Ed made sure to drive his Mercedes when he picked up Lizette from work. She quickly walked up to the car and got in, placing a gym bag at her feet. Hi, Princess, Ed greeted her. Hi, Daddy, Lizette replied happily. Jimbo was really upset when I told him I was quitting. Quitting? I thought you were just taking a few days off since this job is only 3 or 4 days, Ed said, surprised. No, Daddy, Lizette said, putting her small hand on Ed's arm. I'm going on all your trips with you from now on. Oh, Ed said. What time is it? Lizette asked sleepily when Ed woke her at 3:30 the next morning. Early enough, Ed said, smiling. But it'll be late if we don't hurry. He gently helped her up. She smiled sleepily while getting ready. Lizette, you can sleep in the truck, he offered. No, you're driving. I need to be awake, she said, rubbing her eyes. Oh? Why is that? Ed asked as she tied her tennis shoes. It's my job, she said. I need to keep you alert. Okay, he shrugged. I've been fine without your help. he said quietly to himself as he made sure he had everything. By 5:18, they were on I-10, heading east. Ed suddenly straightened up, looking worried. Lizette noticed and looked around. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked. Ed switched to the emergency frequency on his radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Oakleaf Smile," he said into the radio. "Come back, Oakleaf Smile, you got a Smokey Bear," a voice crackled back. Ed quickly explained about a car in front of him with no tail lights and another car next to it. He shared his location with the police officer and warned that he wouldn't stop if they tried to make a move. "Understood," the voice replied. 2 minutes later, a police car sped up and swerved in front of the old Cutlass Supreme. Lisette gasped as Ed's truck bumped into the back of the Cutlass, causing it to spin across the highway. Soon, 3 police cars arrived with their lights flashing and sirens on. Ed felt relieved and pulled over to the side of the road. After filling out the accident report, Ed thanked the officers for their quick help, and he and Lisette continued on their trip. "What happened?" Lisette whispered, still a bit shaken by everything. "There have been many swoop and swap cases lately," Ed explained. "That's when one car blocks you, and another suddenly cuts in, making you hit it. Then they sue your insurance, saying they are hurt. Recently, they have started harming the driver and stealing the car." "Oh my goodness," Lisette exclaimed, her eyes wide. "I don't worry about the things in the trailer, but there are some important items in the truck," Ed said. "When I saw that pickup truck tailgating, I knew trouble was coming, and I wasn't going to stop." "What do you have in the truck?" Lisette asked. "You," Ed replied. "Honestly, the things in the back don't matter much to me, but you are important." "Oh, Daddy," Lisette sighed. By the time they reached New Orleans, Lisette had fallen asleep against the passenger window. Ed gently woke her up. She looked around. She had never been anywhere but Oakleaf, Texas, and New Orleans didn't match what she had imagined. It looked like another worn-out area. However, a shrimp po' boy and a Barks root beer from a little local place changed her mind about New Orleans a bit. "Nothing like a cold Barks, right?" Ed laughed heartily. "Daddy, what do you say?" Lisette teased him. "Ah," Ed answered playfully. "No, you say excuse me," Lisette giggled. "No, you say excuse me. I say ah," Ed corrected, smiling. "So on the radio you called yourself Oakleaf Smile?" Lisette asked, while Ed drove the tractor without the trailer to a depot in New Orleans. "Oakleaf Smile," Ed said. "When I first started driving, I had braces. A girl at the orthodontist's office told me I would have a smile better than all of Oakleaf, so I named myself Oakleaf Smile." By the time they reached Atlanta, Lisette was calling herself Oakleaf Princess. Although she didn't know all the words and often asked Ed to explain things, she liked talking with the other truck drivers. "When's our next trip?" Lisette asked as Ed parked at the Oakleaf depot. "Probably in 2 or 3 days," Ed said with a smile. "And how old do you have to be to drive a truck?" Lisette asked as they walked to Ed's car. 21, Ed replied. "Well, when I'm 21, I'll get my license so I can drive too. Okay, Dad?" Lisette said. He didn't ask her where she wanted to go. He just drove to their home. Inside her room, Lisette changed into a comfy t-shirt and climbed into bed. "You're on my side," Ed said playfully. "I know," she giggled. He wrapped his arms around her and she sighed happily. When he woke up 5 hours later, his arm was asleep. "I love you, Dad," Lisette mumbled when Ed finally moved his arm. "I love you too, Princess," Ed replied. He got up to wash up and then went back to bed. "I'll get up in a minute and make us something to eat, okay?" Lisette said. "No, I really want Stone Grill," Ed said. "Have you ever had their steaks?" Yeah, every day. I'm so tired of that place," Lisette said jokingly. "If you keep complaining, I might have to teach you a lesson," Ed said with a laugh. "Come on," Lisette groaned. "What is it?" Ed asked. "I just feel really stressed," Lisette admitted. They took a quick shower together, enjoying their time before getting dressed. Ed put on a button-down shirt and pants while Lisette dried her hair. Then he drove her to her apartment to find something nice to wear. Michelle, Lisette's roommate, was upset about the high electric bill and the overdue cable bill. Where was Lisette's share? Lisette chose to ignore Ed's presence, and he did the same. Finally, Lisette came into the living room wearing a sleeveless pink dress that looked nice on her. The stretchy fabric fit her figure well. "How much to break your lease with your roommate?" Ed asked, sounding frustrated as they left the apartment. "Month to month, so nothing," Lisette replied. "Good. You're moving in with me," Ed said firmly. "Oh, really?" Lisette leaned closer, intrigued. "Why's that?" "Because you belong with me," Ed answered. At the restaurant, Ed smirked as they found the hostess. Lionel and Carol looked annoyed. The matron shrugged, showing that the dining room was full. "Jim, how are you? Reservation for Carol?" Ed said. "Ah, yes, right this way, Mr. Carroll," Jim said politely. "Linus and Carol, good to see you," Ed said casually as they walked past the unhappy couple. It's Lionel," Lionel corrected. "Oh, come on, everyone knows it's Lionel," Carol said sharply. Lisette noticed there were no prices on her menu. Being in the service industry, she knew she shouldn't worry about the menu prices. Ed hadn't told her to be careful with her order or set any limits. So, she ordered a ribeye steak, cooked medium, with asparagus, and a baked potato loaded with toppings. "That sounds good," Ed said, nodding. "Make it 2, please," he added. "That blonde woman in the lobby?" Lisette asked, sipping her wine. "My ex-wife," Ed replied. "Ah, that's why she keeps looking over here," Lisette observed. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter," Ed said with a grin. Then the waiter brought their meals. "Here you go. Please enjoy the steaks and let me know how you like them." Lisette exclaimed, relishing the tasty meat. "What she means is she really likes it," Ed laughed. The waiter looked to Ed for his opinion. "It's okay, I guess," Ed shrugged. "I'm glad you like it, mister." "Carol," the waiter said with a smile as he walked away. "This is great," Lisette said, enjoying every bite. "I love this place because the beef is excellent," Ed agreed. "You hear people say that, but I didn't know what it meant," Lisette replied. When the waiter mentioned the desserts, Ed smiled as Lisette's eyes brightened at the mention of chocolate decadence cake. "I think she wants the chocolate cake. I'll have the chocolate mint pie and coffee," Ed said. "Ma'am? Coffee?" the waiter asked. "Your ex-wife is staring over here," Lisette whispered. If Ed being with another woman bothered Carol, seeing Lisette enjoy dessert with him surely added to her feelings. "But you're with me," Lionel said confidently. "Right, and he's using a nice credit card while you have a prepaid one," Carol thought quietly. "Daddy, I'm full," a young woman said nearby. After dinner, Ed drove Lisette back to her apartment so she could pack up her things and tell Michelle she was moving out. He stopped at Burns & Burns to pick up some cardboard boxes from the back. "Hey, I heard you quit your job," Michelle said as Lisette entered. "Yeah," Lisette answered. "How will you pay rent?" Michelle asked, her voice rising. "She won't," Ed said firmly. "She's moving out." "She owes me money," Michelle shot at Ed. "How much?" he asked. $200 or $300, she replied quickly. "Here," Ed said, handing her $300 bills. Ed and Lisette were on their way to Los Angeles, California. As they drove, Lisette looked around, seeing parts of the city that don't often appear on TV while they waited in traffic. The government housing along the freeway seemed to go on forever. After Ed dropped off their stuff, he drove along the coast, allowing Lisette to see the sunny Los Angeles she had seen in pictures and on TV. 5.5 hours on that highway? Lisette said while watching surfers catch waves. "No way!" "Well, I need to get back to Texas, Dad," she continued. "Sure, but that won't make it happen any faster," Ed joked. "You're driving me nuts," Lisette admitted, running her tongue over her heavy braces. "I know how you feel. I had braces too," Ed said as he answered his phone. "Hi, Tom, what's going on?" "Not sure if you've seen the news," Tom replied. "We're on the road, just in Los Angeles," Ed said. "There was a tornado in Oakleaf about 4 hours ago," Tom informed him. "Is Annabelle okay?" Ed asked, feeling worried. "What's going on?" Lisette asked, sitting up straight. "The school is fine, it didn't get hit," Tom reassured. "Her house is okay too, and I'm all right, thanks for asking." "If you weren't okay, that would have been the first thing you said," Ed said. So what's the bad news? The depot is a loss. The diner is gone too. It will have to be rebuilt, Tom explained. Was it the Oxbow Plaza? Ed asked. Yep, it's totaled. They are still searching through the wreckage, Tom said. Didn't you have a friend living there? I did, but she's with me now, Ed replied. Were there any injuries? What's happening? Lisette asked, looking anxious. Still searching through the debris, Tom said. The Pack and Go probably also got hit. Looks like I need to call my insurance agent, Ed said. Oh, wait, that's you. Yeah, I'll send you a list, Tom agreed. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll stop by the office, Ed told him. What's going on? Lisette asked, her voice laced with worry. A tornado caused a lot of damage in Oakleaf, Ed explained. Oh my gosh, Michelle, Lisette gasped as she grabbed her phone. Lisette, there's a gas leak. Your phone might spark it, Ed warned. I know it's hard, but you need to wait. As they got back on the highway, Lisette's nerves were still frayed. Hi, sweetheart. How are you? Ed answered when Annabelle's ringtone rang. Daddy? Grandma's trailer is gone, Annabelle cried. But Rose is okay, right? Ed asked. Thank goodness. She was at the store when the tornado hit, Annabelle sobbed. But Daddy, her house. Where are you now? Ed asked. We're at Mama's office, Annabelle replied. And Mama wants... I'll have Miss Teresa bring a key to the house for you and Grandma, Ed said. Give me that. Is that Ed? Let me talk to him, Ed heard Carol's voice. Ed smiled and hung up just as Carol said hello. Teresa White thanked Ed for checking in. The small office building had escaped damage. She also agreed to bring the house key to Rose Cooper. Carol Cooper? Teresa asked. She can stay with Lionel if that's what she wants, Ed replied. I'll let her know, Teresa said, sounding a bit too cheerful. Complaining won't fix anything, Ed said. Be quiet, Lisette said as she adjusted her braces. Ed kept driving through the night. The dull light of dawn showed the damage the tornado had caused to his community. Tom met Ed at the office. They looked at the list of properties Ed owned that had been affected. Ed noticed Tom's attention was drawn to Lisette, who was wearing denim shorts and one of Ed's shirts. She's old enough, right? Tom finally whispered. 19 and a half, Ed joked. I'm 20. I got these braces for my birthday, remember? Lisette corrected him. Okay, 20 and a half, Ed said. Now, is there anything from Pack and Go that can be saved? Let's donate it to the cleanup crews. The same for the diner. Anything we can salvage there? Send it to the shelters. I did that yesterday, Tom smiled. I thought you'd want that. The employees are still getting paid, Ed said. I already told them that, Tom agreed. And you should give yourself a little raise, Ed said. Just a small one. Lisette giggled, and Ed smiled at her. We have a crew coming from Low Ridge to work at the depot tomorrow, Tom said. We've got 37 trucks just waiting. Then let them help with the cleanup, Ed suggested. We offered. The mayor said no, Tom explained. That's frustrating, Ed said. She really messed up that election, you know? Because she's a woman? Lisette questioned. No, because of her choices, Ed clarified. Her gender has nothing to do with it. Feeling tired, Ed left Tom's office and headed home. He felt happiness seeing Rose's old car parked in front of the house. Dad! Annabelle shouted when Ed came in through the garage. Hey, sweetheart, why aren't you at school? Ed asked as he hugged her. It's Saturday, Annabelle said with a smile. Hi, Ed, Rose greeted. Hi, Lisette said quietly. Annabelle, this is Lisette. She's my friend. Ed introduced them. Hi, Annabelle said shyly. Rose, I'm really sorry about your trailer, Ed said gently. Oh, it's fine, Rose shrugged. Thankfully, I have insurance with Oakleaf. So, not Cooper Hahn? Ed asked. Exactly, Rose replied. Do I look silly? Let's not talk about how you look, okay? Ed teased. Smart mouth. Rose smiled back. Hi, I'm Rose. My daughter made a big mistake by letting go of this good man. Hi, I'm Lisette, Lisette said again. So, you're a truck driver like Ed? Rose asked. Sort of, Lisette smiled. My nickname is Daddy's Sweetie Pie, Annabelle said. Mine's Oakleaf Princess, Lisette said. Carol wants me to call her as soon as you arrive, Rose warned Ed. Rose, I just drove for 30 hours straight, Ed sighed. Can I have 3 hours to rest? Okay, Rose said. I appreciate what you do. Ed had just laid down when Lizette came into the room. He sighed, realizing it had been 3.5 hours. He and Lizette shared a quick shower but kept things simple. Ed got dressed and stepped out of the bedroom. He could hear Carol's voice echoing in the house. Well, Carol, no one told you to get involved with that person, Rose was saying to her daughter as Ed entered the living room. Ed, I need... Carol started. No one cares what you need, Carol, Ed said. Does anyone have coffee? I'll make it, Annabelle said, heading into the kitchen. Seriously, Ed, I need... Carol tried again. Seriously, Carol, what you need or want is not my concern, Ed said. Hi, Lizette said cheerfully as she entered the room. Rose and Ed tried hard not to laugh. Lizette had put on her old cheerleading outfit. Her hair was in 2 ponytails, and she was smiling wide, showing her braces. Hi, she chirped again. Oh, you must be Miss Carol. Hi, I'm Lizette. Carol stared at the young girl. Annabelle came into the room, saw Lizette, and started to laugh. Lizette smiled back. Daddy, the coffee's almost ready, Annabelle giggled. Oh, do they have any juice? Lizette asked. Yes, Annabelle replied. Annabelle, sweetie, is this one of your friends? Carol asked. Huh? No, this is Daddy's girlfriend, Annabelle said. Ed, is there somewhere we can talk privately? Carol asked, glancing at the cheerful girl hugging Ed. This is fine, Ed said, sitting on the couch. Lizette sat with him, curling her feet under herself. Lizette? Carol said. That's what I said, Carol replied sharply. Lizette, Ed gently corrected. Oh, anyway, why don't you go play? The grown-ups need to talk, Carol said. I'm grown up, Lizette smiled. Daddy lets me have some of his drinks sometimes, right, Daddy? Princess, stop it, Ed laughed. You're making me laugh too much. Spoil sport, Lizette said playfully. I was having fun. Got tired of driving? You could be an actress, Rose complimented. You? You're a truck driver? Carol asked, surprised. That's right, good buddy. You got the oak leaf princess with you, Lizette said. With cream, right, Daddy? Annabelle called. Make it blonde, Lizette agreed. Annabelle carefully brought the mug into the living room. Ed took a careful sip and then smiled. It wasn't very tasty. Annabelle must have put in too much coffee for the amount of water she used. But he swallowed the drink and beamed with pride at his little girl. Almost as good as yours, Lizette, Ed said kindly. Anyway, Ed, Lionel, Carol said nervously. Annabelle, sweetie, why don't you and Grandma go? Oh, come on, Rose interrupted. I want to hear this. What did that guy do? Carol's eyes filled with tears of frustration. She set her jaw firmly and glared at Ed. Lionel took all the money, Carol confessed. All what money? Ed asked. Cooper Hahn and mine. He cleaned out the bank accounts, the savings, everything, Carol explained. Cooper and that tornado, Ed said. How will you cover all those claims? Forget about the claims. How will I pay the bills? Carol snapped. Your bills don't matter right now, Carol, Ed replied. You have clients who lost everything. Their insurance needs to help them. Are you listening to me? He took everything, Carol exclaimed. Who's your underwriter? Lizette asked. We didn't have one, Carol admitted. Oh man, you are in trouble, Ed said with a bitter laugh. Ed, I don't suppose you could, Carol stammered. Let Rose and Annabelle stay here for as long as they need. Of course, Ed agreed. Remember, I wanted to take care of Annabelle when we divorced. You did? Annabelle asked. You told me he didn't. Annabelle, he's not your father, Carol snapped. No, my father is off with all our money, Annabelle said. My daddy? He's right here. Ed, could you? I need to borrow some money. Carol tried again. Borrow, as in you'll pay it back? Ed smiled. How will you do that? Lionel took your business, remember? But what am I going to do? Carol complained. Don't know, and don't care, Ed replied. Did Casa Ole get damaged by that tornado? The one by my house? Yeah, it's gone, Rose said. Too bad. Their enchiladas were good, Ed said. How about no, Annabelle's not old enough for Gearbox. Ed, please, I need, Carol continued. That's a big issue we had during our marriage, Ed responded. It was always about what Carol wanted or needed. Well, right now, I'm hungry. Oh, I'll see if Bully Burgers is open, Annabelle said excitedly. She found her phone and quickly searched for the number. Then she hit send. Yes, are you open? You are? Oh, that's great, Annabelle chirped. Well, I guess we're going to Bully's, Ed smiled. Yes, after my health scare, I really need that food, Rose joked. Looks like we can all fit in your car, Rose, Ed said. I am not going to Bully's in this outfit. Lizette smiled and stood up. Were you really a cheerleader? Annabelle asked as Lizette and she left the room. Uh-huh, and the year I was head cheerleader, Miriam A. Ferguson won the state, Lizette said. Bully Burgers was a small hamburger place that had been open for 53 years. The original grill was still working. If it ever caught fire, it would be a big problem because of all the grease built up over the years. I want, Annabelle began. The cannonball, add pineapple, Ed guessed. Really? Lizette asked, surprised. Uh-huh, it's the best, Annabelle replied excitedly. The cannonball has half a pound of our ground beef, 4 slices of thick bacon, 2 slices of pepper jack cheese, and grilled jalapenos, Lizette read from the menu. Ooh, Daddy, can I have that too? Add pineapple? Ed asked again. Yeah, Lizette answered. What do older people usually eat? Rose wondered. Don't know. Let's ask someone older, Ed suggested. But I'm getting the blue bully and their onion strings. Blue cheese sounds good for me too, Rose agreed. Lizette and Annabelle both picked their favorites, especially since Ed didn't want his pickles, so they took those. Rose shared her worries about health while finishing her burger and fries. So, Carol, what did the police say? Ed asked while Carol quietly ate her ranch bully. About what? Carol replied. About Lionel taking off with the money? Ed clarified. Oh, I'm not really... Carol stumbled over her words. You're joking, Ed sighed. Carol wiped her eyes and shared what she could with the detective from Oakleaf County. He was experienced and didn't call her foolish. Instead, he gently reminded her to be careful about who she lets access her bank accounts. People can think they really know someone for years, only to discover they've been untrustworthy, Detective Eichenbach said. Believe me, she knows all about it, don't you, Carol? Ed said with a tight smile. That's right, Rose chimed in. Grandma, Annabelle giggled. And what's your nickname? Idiot's mama, I guess. Daddy's sweetie pie come back, Rose joked. Detective Eichenbach reminded everyone that their main task was to help those affected by the tornado. There were still over 15 people listed as missing, and they were working hard to find them. Well, I am tired. I'm going to bed, Ed said. Rose, no rollerblading in the house, okay? You're so funny, Rose smirked. Ed, I don't have anywhere to go, Carol admitted softly. That's too bad, huh? Ed replied. Daddy, there are 4 other bedrooms in this house, Lizette quietly pleaded. Carol, no loud music in the house, Ed reminded her. Good night. Good night, Lizette replied, following Ed down the hall. Where do you think you're going? Carol said sharply as Annabelle hurried past her. Gracie's, going to play some basketball, Annabelle explained. Did I say? Carol began. Before she could finish, Annabelle was already out the door. Rose smiled and turned on the television, raising the volume. She didn't understand why everyone liked it so quiet. Goodness, I thought I told them no rollerblading or loud instruments in the house, Ed complained. Poor woman can't hear well, Lizette said softly, leaning against him. Moments later, she turned around and rested her head on his chest. Your wife is really nice, she said quietly. Ex-wife, Ed corrected her. Do you ever miss her? Lizette asked. With you here? No way, princess, I don't miss her, Ed replied. What if she wanted to come back? Lizette wondered. I would tell her no. I've got the woman of my dreams, Ed said, giving Lizette a gentle squeeze. But what if I wasn't? Lizette started. Are you trying to stir up trouble? Huh? Ed joked. Oh, Lizette laughed. Oh, Daddy, am I being mischievous? Ed playfully swatted Lizette, making her giggle. By Monday morning, the storm had caused many losses, with 23 confirmed dead and 9 still missing. One of those lost was Michelle Lopez. Lizette's former roommate. After shedding her tears for Michelle, Lisette realized that she could have been in that apartment too if it weren't for Edgar. On Thursday, Detective Eichenbach called Carol to say they found someone named Lionel Hahn. He hadn't shared where the money was, though. "Where was he?" Carol asked. "At his mother's house," Detective Eichenbach said with a laugh. She claimed she didn't know where he was. "Found him hiding in her closet." "Oh, good," Ed said when Rose told him about Lionel. "Carol, are you moving in with him?" "He's in jail, Ed," Carol replied sharply. "Oh, right. Moving in with him?" Ed repeated. Lisette and Annabelle snickered, and Carol glared at them. "Tom said I should get a check sometime next week," Rose mentioned. "Okay." "What do you want to do with that money?" Ed asked. "Well, don't you want your house back?" Rose replied. "No, not really," Ed said. "I've got my 3 sweethearts living here. Why would I want my place back? Oh, and Carol is here too." "You could let her stay in the trailer," Rose suggested. "But then Annabelle would have to go," Ed pointed out. No, you all just stay, okay?" "Anyway, Daddy and I need to pick up some wood in Washington," Lisette said. "That won't make things go any faster," Ed replied. "Just be quiet," both Annabelle and Lisette said at once. The next morning, Ed carefully backed the trailer. The airplane parts were safely loaded, but he didn't want to risk any moving around. "This is Daddy's sweetie pie," came a voice over the radio. "Oakleaf Princess, do you hear me?" "This is Oakleaf Princess, Daddy's sweetie pie, I hear you," Lisette laughed into the radio. "Go to school," Ed told her. "Charming," Carol said with annoyance as Annabelle sat in Ed's home office talking on the radio. "My ex-husband is involved with my daughter's friend." "Ex-husband," Rose grinned. "You chose to leave him for someone else." "Good decision." Oakleaf was quickly fixed up. Politicians promised new laws to keep Oakleaf County safe, but nothing really changed. It was just empty talk. No laws could stop strong winds from causing damage. No rules could protect against a storm that throws debris, putting lives and homes at risk. Lionel Hahn had to pay Carol Cooper some money. Cooper Hahn Insurance was told to pay their customers' claims. Ed agreed to loan Carol $2.6 million at 9% interest. "Ed, where will you get that much money?" Carol asked, surprised. Lisette laughed out loud. Ed smiled at her. "What's so funny, Lisette?" Carol asked sharply. "Borrow? Daddy has that kind of money just sitting there," Lisette giggled. "He's the richest in Oakleaf County." "What? He's just a truck driver," Carol said. "Oh my gosh, you really thought that? Just a driver?" Lisette squealed. "Carol, he owns the whole fleet, the depot, the diner." "That's enough, Princess," Ed said with a smile. "He what?" Carol asked, shocked. "Come on, Carol, you lived with him for 15 years and didn't know that?" Lisette laughed. Ed shrugged while Lisette walked away, still giggling. "And as part of the deal?" Annabelle giggled at Grace. "I get to live here." "That won't speed things up," Grace teased as Annabelle playfully reacted. "Stop it! Daddy says the same thing," Annabelle exclaimed, grabbing her basketball. "Come on, I think it stopped raining." Rose fiddled with her new hearing aid. She hated to admit it, but Ed was right. She had been missing a lot. Annabelle's laughter, birds singing, Ed and Lisette having fun together. When the tornado flew past Burns and Burns' grocery store, Rose barely heard the sirens. Everyone said the funnel cloud sounded like a train rushing by. She only caught a faint noise. "Unfortunately, I hear how much you complain," Rose said to Carol. "Other than that loan you know you can't pay back, what else is that man asking for?" "Nothing," Carol had to admit. "That's right, nothing. You live in his house, eat his food, use his hot water, and he asks for nothing. So stop complaining," Rose said as she turned on the television. "Now let's be quiet. General Hospital is about to start." "My Lexus," Carol called out. "What? What about your Lexus?" Rose asked. "That first Lexus. If he had that kind of money, Ed could have just bought it for me," Carol said. "Did you ask for one?" Rose replied. "Well, no, but—" Carol started. "No, you went behind Ed's back and got it for yourself," Rose continued. "Annabelle's needs? Who cares? Ed's needs? Who cares? Carol wants a Lexus, and that's all that matters." "I took care of Ed's needs a lot," Carol argued. "And see how easy it was for Ed to find someone else who actually puts his needs first," Rose said. And what did you bring to the table? Now, no more talking. My show is on.
What's up, story lovers? This is the Story Guy, and if you're hungry for crazy tales and mind-blowing narratives, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on our weekly dose of crazy cheating stories, fun fiction and gut-ripping comedy from around the world. But that's not all. We also create our own original stories, and trust me, you won't find these anywhere else. Want even more spine-tingling reads? Head down to the description and grab our exclusive story collections. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.